New Year. This is going to be our Daniel chapter 6. We're going to be our study on Daniel chapter 6. Hope everyone had a great New Year. So we are normally going to do communion today, but because people are still traveling and whatnot, I think we'll do it next week, next Sunday. I just realized because it's too short of a time frame for people to still be traveling. So we'll do that next Sunday, okay? And so we'll start with prayer and get going on our study for today. So Father, thank you for this opportunity we have. Thank you for another year that we can embrace, at least in our Gentile calendar, as we know that as we really don't know the actual exact day and time, as we call it, January 5th of 2025. We know that it's not the exact timing, and only you know the exact timing of what actual day it really is, from the times that you changed the holding of the sun in its place, and the changing of the earth, and just all the different things that have happened and how men have changed the calendars. And so and all that being said, acknowledging that, we just thank you that still yet we moved ahead to what we would call another year. So we know that we move ahead to another opportunity to see what you're going to be doing in our lives, to thank you for what you already have done, to reflect on what you already have given to us, and to just be grateful, not for what we don't have and not for what's happening wrong, but to embrace it all, good, bad, and indifferent, that we have a new opportunity to embark to see about what is next for us, what is out ahead. We know that each day we come closer to your day approaching, when you call us home, and then when you come back for your own and bring back the unfortunate nature of the end of this earth, which ends with such a calamity. But we ask you to help us prepare our minds and hearts for ourselves and for those in our family and loved ones and family of faith. Help us to all be, again, grateful. Thank you for the needs that we have as your sheep, that you meet our needs, whether that be financial, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, most of all. Help us to be growing in our spirit this year more than ever. Help us to be introspective more than ever. And help us to be always, clinging to you as the valley of the shadow of death. When the sheep see these dark clouds coming, they get closer to the shepherd. May we too know the dark clouds are coming, and we cling closer to you, because only you know where safe passage is, when and where and how to do that for us. Help us to cling close to you, knowing that you are ultimately the judge of us all. And so thank you for helping us understand another year opportunities to again reflect on the book of Daniel. Thank you for your servant and his testimony and how you were the first one to call him a prophet. And we thank you for understanding that you give us to understand how that applies to us and his friends and the experience that they had. Help us to continue to glean insight, understanding, appreciation, and just lessons to be learned about what's out ahead and the practical nature of how we apply it to our lives. So be with us now, and each and every one, again, calm and heal and provide to every soul and spirit and heart and body what we need. And may you be our pastor, our shepherd, our guide, our coming bridegroom, our counselor, our everything in this time. May the words of my mouth, meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our redeemer and our coming bridegroom. And we ask this in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. All right, so welcome again, Vicki. Welcome back to 2025, a new year. So we're going to be going into the book of Daniel in chapter 6. But before I do that, it's always behooved upon me, even though we did cover some of this from the year in review last week, but I wanted to just give a snippet of the chapters to where we're at now. So I want to make sure we're clear on where we're at, because it's been a while since we've been together. So let's kind of get the overarching out of the way. Daniel was 13 when the book of Daniel starts off. The year was 605 BC. We now fast forward on chapter 6, where now it's 539 BC. He's now 79 years old. 66 years has gone by. That's a lot. So in the first 5 chapters, 66 years has transpired. You can't forget that for scale. He's no longer this young kid. He's not some young teenager or 20-year-old in the lion's den. I don't care what the cartoons or what the movies tell you or what the images and illustrations of Bible study notes tell you. He was an older man. He was a minimum 79 years of age. How do I know that? Because Yeled in the Hebrew, people say, how do you know how old he is? Because he lived through the reign of Cyrus into the reign of Darius. And because of that, he couldn't have been, he has to be at least 13. The word Yeled means a child in Hebrew between the age of 13 and 20. And so because of that, he's no older than 20 and no younger than 13. I say he was 13 because if you put him 7 years older, then he's at max 86 years of age. So granted, you want to say he's 86? Okay. but he's no less than 79. That's a fact. But how do you know? I just told you how I know. He's no less than 79. If you want to give you latitude, okay, you think he was 20 when he came over to Babylon, okay, then he's 86. No matter how you slice it, he's an older man, okay? Much older man. Think about you and your life. Would you think you learn more or less if you walk with God intimately, distinctly faithful to him? Would you be the same person? No. You're a much different, bettered person, right? This is who Daniel is. No, we were going to do communion today, but I wanted to put a pause on that because Lainey couldn't join us today, and I thought with her being out, others might be out too. So I just wanted to make sure we were all able to participate as a family of faith. So I wanted to make sure we were all doing that next week. If that's okay, I apologize in advance if that causes any issues. I want to make sure that we're all able to participate. And I thought next week might be everybody the chance to get the travel out of the way and family whatnots. We have ourselves family coming by today after service. So I just wanted to make sure I was being considerate of that. So in relationship to the book of Daniel, again, you go back to chapter 1, and chapter 1, what we saw there to review in chapter 1, a couple of highlights before we get to chapter 6, and we're going to cover this today, but we saw factoids of, like, for example, that God is the one who provided to Nebuchadnezzar Judah like on a platter. Like, here you go, take him into captivity. God said he set it and appointed it to be so. It didn't like they could have changed that. So much for free will. Then we learned that Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were among many others of the children of Judah, but they alone had this skillful wisdom and understanding. And Daniel alone of those four, he alone was the one who had this excellent spirit and excellent wisdom that God gave him the interpretations, only him, of dreams and visions. And then we also find that Daniel did a little 10-day trial, and that worked out well for him, of the pulse, things above the ground, speaking to the things that are built up above God's word, the deeper things of God. And he dwelt on that and ruminated on that, was nourished by that, and that was such a distinction over 10 days. They allowed that proviso to take place over the entire 3 years of the Chaldean schooling that chapter 1 mentions, was the dictate of how Nebuchadnezzar treated the young ones he brought in from captivity of all of his conquering of the previous kingdoms. We also know that then chapter 2 expounds chapter 1, because Nebuchadnezzar was like, wow, this guy is all that, right? So then Nebuchadnezzar then has this dream. Daniel's now 16 years old. We're 3 years later, given the Chaldean schooling of 3 years, and now chapter 2 is not a continuation, but an expounding of the events chapter 1, 18 to 20. And then we see Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He's restless. He's irritable. And he's like, I get this dream. What does it mean? And 3 times his wise men are like, And then he sends his captain of the guard and says, kill them all and burn their houses. And Daniel's like, hey, whoa, just a second. What gives? Why the overreaction? He reasons with him. He asks for an audience for the king. And he stops, listens, and heeds Daniel. That is not possible by testosterone, blood-laden, already on his hands, blood. He's already killed people, to stop in his tracks before a young 16-year-old man, boy, teenager. Ain't no way I'm going. And what you're not going to do is tell me that's normal. It ain't normal. Okay? God stopped that man's thought, heart, and actions and said, listen to this young man. And he did. Stopped, listened, heeded, as a matter of fact, and followed through with the king and said, hey, Daniel wants to have an audience with you. Not only did God stop his heart and his thoughts and his actions, the captain of the guard of the armies, he then also changed Nebuchadnezzar's mindset, because he was irritated. He was angry. He was volatile. Kill them all. And God goes, yeah, about that. Sleep. Relax. I'll give you an answer tomorrow morning. What? Who the heck can do that except for God himself? God intervened, which also shows us that God and God alone is the one who provides safe passage for his faithful ones. God and God alone is the one who gives a precious faith promise to his faithful ones. It's God who does that. We don't earn the right to do that or have enough faith. And if I just believe enough faith. No. There's nothing you could reasonably, rationally, verifiably prove that Daniel did to cause this captain of the guard, who was bloodthirsty, who has conquered everything known to man. He only answers Nebuchadnezzar. He already has been murdering people. He gets to Daniel and just stops. Really? That's natural. You think a 16-year-old kid could pull that off. Make him stop and listen and then heed what he's saying. You out your mind. That was a God thing.
And then the king, who Daniel later on, God says, above all kings of the earth, there's no king above all kings. You are the king above all kings of men. So who's going to change his mind and heart and his actions? Again, God himself. So God is showing you he is intricately, intimately, differently involved in Daniel's life more than most people that just follow and trust in him. He was uniquely intervening beyond the pale in Daniel's life. That is not the normalcy. He's done this before, but this is kind of over the top. And so, okay. So then he gets to this point, and then he goes to Nebuchadnezzar, and he goes, here's what you're dreaming. You had dreaming visions. Nebuchadnezzar later on in chapter 4 is going to expound on the vision, but in this case, that Daniel explained to him, but in this case, we only talk about the dream of the head of gold, which is him, the silver of the chest and arms of the Medes and Persian, hence the chest and arms. Then you have the waist and loins of the Greeks, which is the Greek Empire, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And then you have the feet, or the legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay, speaking of the Romans, and that they were split into two empire, Byzantine Empire and Roman Empire. Then you have also the aspect of the toes of clay, referring later on to those idea of the Antichrist and having his re-emphasized aspect that he's going to have a new kingdom, Satan's kingdom, coming with 10 kings he's going to appoint. And Nebuchadnezzar hears this and goes, excuse me? And of course, because Daniel exhibits the wisdom and trustworthiness of God himself, Nebuchadnezzar worships him. Not because he's worshiping a man. He thinks that Daniel, at that point, is a manifestation, how it words it, he's the manifestation of the wisdom and trustworthiness of God himself. And so he worships Daniel. Not because he's going, oh, I want to worship a man. No, not a 16-year-old kid. He believes this 16-year-old is acting so beyond the normalcy, beyond the pale, caused his heart to stop being angry, stop being irritable, stop with his decree of killing, had his captain of his guard stop and listen to him. Heed him. He knew this is not a normal human being. God has his hand on this human being, this 16-year-old boy, more than anything else. Maybe it's more than just that. Maybe God himself is manifested inside of him. He started worshiping Daniel. And Daniel, because he responds in like kind, receiving his gifts, proves to you he wasn't worshiping him, the human, worshiping the God he thought was in Daniel, manifesting himself through him. And that's why Daniel received his gifts and offerings, which is why, again, I'm saying to you, that was the thought of Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel concurs that with his actions. Then we see that Daniel gets appointed over all. He's chief over all the kingdom. Basically, kind of like Joseph and Pharaoh. He's second only to Nebuchadnezzar. He answers to no one but Nebuchadnezzar. Pretty strong statement to make at 16. 16. He's put in charge of second in of command of the biggest kingdom, of the first kingdom, where God said, of the head of gold. And here's this Hebrew, not even a Babylonian, second in charge of Babylonian kingdom. That's profound. Just kind of get that in your head. That is profound. And then Daniel, because of that station, says, hey, can you give a spot to my three friends of some authority here in local Babylon? They can oversee things. Yeah, sure, fine, he says. That's chapter 2 comes to a close. Chapter 3 opens up, and all of a sudden we get Nebuchadnezzar. And now what happens is we go from 605 BC in chapter 1. We go to then 3 years later, 602 BC in chapter 2. And now we're at 586 BC in chapter 3. Only because Septuagint elaborates on us the years where the King James fell short. We find out the year gap there, and all of a sudden we go, oh, wow, now we're fast forwarding. Why the gap, God? Why the fast forwarding? He wants to show you the triptych of the idea of these first 5 chapters are all about the relationship between Daniel, his 3 friends, and how they grew in faith, and the opposite between Nebuchadnezzar and his son, how they did not have a consistency of growing in faith. Nebuchadnezzar up and down, and his son Belshazzar, a kamikaze downwardly of just idiocy. The contrast is stark. Daniel grew like a weed. His friends followed a little lap. They were delayed in their growth. They followed later. This is why chapter 3 starts off focusing on them. It took them what Daniel did in 3 years of his spiritual growth. It took them 3 plus 16 years, 19 years later, going on 20 years. It took a while to build that statue. So it was a year into that. So what a coincidence, 20 years later. 20 is God's number, 10 ordinal completion, 2 witness and testimony. God was ordaining the divisive nature of the testimony between the earmark between a mature one with the Sumedikoi were a type of the three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, known as Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. But Daniel is noted as being the faithful one, who's the hundred fruit. So he's different than that. So that's why they have this earmark difference. It shows this the year 20 years shows this earmark of distinction of testimony and division between the two fruit yields of those who are mature ones versus those mature ones who are faithful ones who have 100 fruit versus those who have 60 and 30. There's a distinction. So that's why Daniel's not involved at all. Not to mention, it's 586 BC. He's overseeing the last wave of the captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. Why would he not? He's second in charge. That's what time it is. What up? So as he's doing that, on goes this dedication of this image that Nebuchadnezzar gets all, I'm going to make this image because now, 16 years later, it kind of, I'm the head of gold. I'm going to make an image just like Daniel said. Idiot. And this image is about as big as the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Square in New York. Massive tree. Right? That's how big the image was that he was making. And it took him a while to make it. Many months, 6 to 9 months, up to a year. But the reality is, what a coincidence. It images the typology of the Antichrist when the false prophet, when now he gets slain and the beast is there, he puts up the image in the second half and says, worship this. This is the typology of this. Then we find the Chaldeans, who should have been grateful their lives were spared under Daniel's testimony to Nebuchadnezzar, and the three Hebrew children who prayed for Daniel to have this, and Daniel got the mysteries revealed to him because he asked God, and he praised God, and he thanked God, gave God all the credit. And you would think, if my life was spared because of what you did in my bequest, I'd be grateful to you. I don't care if you're gay, straight, Jew, Muslim. I don't care if you're black or white or brown, male or female. I do not care. If you saved my life, when it comes to that, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to be grateful. Why wouldn't I be? You have to be a Christian to me to be grateful to you, save my life? You have to be the same color skin as me? No. If you saved my life, I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, right? Where's the gratitude, man? Right? No, but they're angry. They're jealous. They're irritable that the Hebrews saved our lives. So they had a bone to pick. Daniel wasn't there, so they could take it out on these three. So what do? They find Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah saying, ain't going to do it. Ain't going to serve or worship. Goes back to taking the mark of the beast or worship the image. They don't do neither one. They're like, we're not going to serve, take the mark of the beast. We're not going to worship the image. We're not going to bow down to you. Ain't going to happen. And they say, well, not only they're not doing it, they're not telling others not to do it. And Nebuchadnezzar says, as soon as that happens, take them out. Put them in the fire. Immediately, he said. And then, when they got called on it, Nebuchadnezzar calls them before him 3 times, basically, to get like he tries to, hey, are you sure? Are you sure? Wait a minute. Whoa. I thought you said immediately they get cast in the fire. Why the interaction? Why giving them a second and third chance? What's up with that? Why giving them a chance to explain themselves to you? You can see the affinity. There was a torn nature of Nebuchadnezzar. He knew who their God was 16 years earlier. He didn't like he's a moron. He knew. He just chose to neglect. And now he's choosing to try to find that Pontius Pilatism of, I don't want to, I wash my hands, and he still carries out the crucifixion of Jesus. You're still guilty, bro. You can wash hands all you want, Pontius Pilate. Did you still carry through with the crucifixion? Then you're guilty. Nebuchadnezzar's like, well, I want to give him a chance. You're still guilty because you know who their God is. What are you doing? Trying to impose upon them what you know they can't do. No, they don't want to do. So, what happens? They say in verse 17 and 18 in chapter 3, I don't care what God does. Whether he takes my life in the fire, takes our life, or provides our life, sustains it. Either way, that's not the point. The point is, no matter what that outcome comes to, is irrelevant to this main fact. We will not serve, and we will not worship. Period. And then they gets kicked off, throws them in, fully clothed, bound. The fire 7 times hotter. Speaking of the tribulation period. And these Sumedikoi typology, they got nothing happens to them. Not a single stitch of hair singed. Matter of fact, in bound, the first thing they do, Septuagint elaborates for us, they bow down and start worshiping and start singing. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, what? Not to mention the guys who threw him in were burned by the fire immediately. Meaning regular folk get consumed and destroyed during tribulation. These Sumedikoi are a little different. These tribute children, they're protected. And he sees a 4th person walking around. Supposed to be 3. What's up with that? He sees like one of the sons of God. He doesn't know it's Jesus. But they knew it was because they took a knee right away. They started singing praises. He's going, first of all, why are they singing? Taking a knee. Opposed to hear pains of grief and anguish and cries for mercy. And I'm hearing sing songs? Say what? And they're bowing? And who's the fourth? What's that? And that's why he's freaked out. And then, when he comes out, he comes to again like, oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. The God of Daniel. That's right. Moron. He knew. He got snapped back to reality. Chapter 4 then kicks in. He starts reminiscing back. Chapter 4 is just reminiscing back. Now he's reminiscing like about what just happened. Then they fast forward and he's at the end of his tenure as king. About 40 years later, and he's just thinking about it, going, wow. About the vision also that Daniel told him about the tree. It's happened. My kingdom has come to a place where I am like the tree, who is stretched over. I got another symbolism of the Antichrist, of Satan and his kingdom in the second half. Everybody's under his rule. He's going to get chopped down, isn't he? And all of a sudden, 12 months after his memory of this, we find from Jewish and from Greek literature, not in the Bible, it says that when Nebuchadnezzar was made to be a beast for 7 years, he was restored and died within 1 to 2 years after this. This is what Jewish historian and Greek historians both concur, which means you have Jew and non-Jew saying the same thing, which I then say that holds some water there, because it's not in the Bible, the actual time frame of when this happened. We have to then therefore understand outside the scripture and historical facts. Do we have Hebraic and non-Hebraic consistency? Yeah. Which means, hello, this is toward the end of his reign. When he's thinking about this tree image. And then God goes, wham! And puts him into a beast because he once again had lost his way. Daniel came to him in chapter 2. He recognized the God of Israel, lost his way 16 years later, made an image of him. Moron! Then, the end of his reign ends. Let me get to the idea when his reign ends. His reign ends in 562 BC. So now we're talking what? We're talking 24 years later. 24 years, so 16 years later, he forgot what Daniel had done 16 years earlier, what God had did through Daniel. Then, 24 years later, he's remembering back, and he forgets once again. He starts feeling himself like, oh, I am this tree, I am this head of gold. Oh my gosh. Brother man, how do you not know that God's in charge? And so then God goes, enough. I gave you 2 examples of Daniel interpreting your dream and vision, not even being told a thing. I told him everything, what you saw and what it means. And reflecting back at the vision I told him about, in between there, I told you about the fiery furnace. I protected my 3 Hebrew children. I protected them. And you saw also then, you also reflected back then, you knew. And now you're going to act like this? With this memory of reflecting back on the vision of the tree, you're going to act like you're a pompous ass? No, I don't go with that. Sorry. And God goes, speaking of pompous ass, I'll make you into the beast of burden, like an ass, as Scripture uses the word ass, as in beast of burden, as in a donkey. That's what you are. You're a beast of burden, which is probably a donkey. That's what he was acting like. He just, couldn't talk, couldn't wipe his backside, couldn't eat like a normal person. That's all he could do. And God's like, who's the God now? Well, I can't hear you. What's that? Oh, that's what I thought. You see, you act like an ass. I made you into an ass. How you doing? There you go. There's your first hee-haw episode right there. Ha-ha. So then, 7 years. And by the way, Belshazzar, his son, is 11 years old. He sees his daddy go from a man to a donkey, to a beast of burden. He sees it. He sees that. I don't know about you. I have trauma in my life. And they say people who have trauma forget their childhood memories. But you can't sit here and tell me I forgot my memory. My first memory in life is at the age of 12. My dad beating the tar out of my mom, and all of us standing by couldn't do nothing about it, even though we said stop. He just looked at us like, who cares, and kept going. So I relate to this issue. If he's 11, there's no way in Hades I'm going to believe he forgot that. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. He forgot, he remembered that. Matter of fact, Daniel says so in the next chapter, saying, you knew, you pompous jerk, you knew your daddy was off the rails. He had a testimony of God through Daniel, was like, oh my gosh, he agreed with God, lost his way 16 years later, used to your children in the fiery furnace. Oh, that's right, this is the God of Israel, only that God that matters. Then he got 24 years later, lost his way again, or feeling himself on the tree. I'm King Kong, ain't got nothing on me. Really? And God goes, wait! Oh, how you doing? How you doing, big old chest peacocking dude? Can you talk? How's that God thing going for you? Sad. and also hilarious at the same time. That's when God says, everybody in this whole world, inhabitants, are reputed as nothing, nothing. And no one can stay his hand or say to him, what doest thou? As he does what he pleases. And Nebuchadnezzar, before he dies, and he's restored back, now he's restored back, which means Belshazzar, his son's 18 years old. 18. Sees that. And you see, here's his dad say this in chapter 4 at the very end. We're getting close to chapter 6 now. And in chapter 4, he hears his dad say, praise and extol and honor, the last verse of chapter 4, verse 37. Praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, whose works are truth, and whose ways judgments, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. In other words, son, listen! I've gone the way of being a doofus. And I've gone the way of through that life of being a complete abject moron, being ignorant of who God was. There was moments in my life when Daniel showed me who God was, when Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they told me who God was. They showed me too. And then again I forgot. And God himself showed me the last time. Oh, I get it now, son. He can make lowly anybody. He is the King of heaven. And his son heard that at 18. And goes, okay, moron. His son heard it and goes, yeah, whatever, Dad. How do I know that? Chapter 5, verse 11, his mama said, your father, your father, your father. 3 times. God likes that number 3, doesn't he? He's triune. Peter denied him 3 times. Because that Belshazzar was told that in chapter 5, verse 11, when she says, your father, your father, your father. Why 3 times? To show you and me, Nebuchadnezzar forgot the testimony of his father. He forgot testimony of God through his father, through Daniel, through Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And lastly, he forgot his place of who makes who king. Who do you think you are? You forgot who you are, who your dad was, and who Daniel is, who God is in the person of Daniel. What is wrong with you? So what did you do, chapter 5? Now we're at, by the way, chapter 4 and 5 is a gap in there of a couple of years. A couple, 3 kings in there that God just glosses over because why? He's not concerned with those kings. He's concerned with the message of showing the triptych of, again, parlaying Daniel, his spiritual growth, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, spiritual growth. 16-year divisive growth period. It took them 16 more years to get to where Daniel was. He's contrasting that with Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. There's Nebuchadnezzar first interacting with Daniel, a testimony of who God is in 602 BC. Then he gets another testimony of who God is in 586 BC. Then he gets another testimony of who God is 7 years before he passes on, which is 555 BC. So God gave him 3 memories, 3 opportunities to understand who God was. And Nebuchadnezzar, to his credit, he responded correctly, but then he fell off the horse. Responded correctly, then fell off the horse. Last time, God himself busted him. He fell off the horse and he got restored back. And this time, he ends his life. To his credit, with 2 years left to live, he says, you know what? Last thing I'm going to make sure my son knows that the King of Heaven is the God of Israel. But his son's like, no, I don't care, because you're a moron. So here's Belshazzar, and what does he do? Oh, yeah, I'm going to take the vessels from the temple that we took and looted. I want to make those my gods. You know, the gold, silver, brass, copper, iron, the wood and concrete and all that stuff. I'm going to make that my God. Oh my gosh. Not only are you ignoring your dad, you're ignoring testimony of God, but you're also then bastardizing what God has given to worship him and making those gods. You've crossed the line. It's over for you. And his mom's like, your father, your father, your father, in verse 11. And we remember when Daniel confronts him, I like how he says, oh yeah, I've heard of Daniel. Heard of him, you say? You moron. He was 27 years old when he began to reign. 9 years after he saw his dad be restored. 9 years later, number of completion, he doesn't have any reflection or any kind of application of learning. He just is so arrogant, so narcissistic, so self-consumed, so self-righteous, he misses the point. Then he reigns, 27 years old to 41. He reigns for quite a while, 14 years. And what happens then? 20 years, 30 years removed from 11 to age 41. 30 years removed from when he saw his dad get cold busted by God to now 41. His life's coming to an end. 30 years. Why? Because God's showing you he lacked maturity. He was an immature, pompous ass. I'm sorry to say it that way, but he was. He is, and he was. And that's why God said in verse 25, "Meeny, meeny, tikal you parson." You tell me why God has a hand come out of midair and go on a wall. You've been weighed and found lacking. Paraphrase in common vernacular, I see you and you suck. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. God saying, I see you and you're pathetic. Pathetic. And he's like, get Daniel. I've heard of him. Heard of him? You never counseled him at all for 14 years of your reign? Really? You ignored your daddy. You ignored God relevance in Daniel's life. And you're so filling yourself, which is why your mama said 3 times, your father, don't get self-absorbed and arrogant and narcissistic. Learn the lessons of those who went before you. And listen to God and those who speak for him. But no, not you, you pompous, arrogant, narcissistic jerk. So Daniel says in verse 22, "And thou his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled your heart, because you knew all this." And that word for knew, he perceived, he understood. And I'm not the one who called him prideful and arrogant. Daniel did, because God told Daniel to make sure he knows. He's a pompous, self-absorbed, narcissistic, self-righteous, arrogant, evil human. And there's no reason for it. You had your dad to learn from. You had me to learn from. God saying to the people I put in your life, namely Daniel, you ignored both. And lastly, you did the one thing I told you I don't like. Getting all self-consumed and peacocking on me as if you're some kind of equal to me. Did you not listen at all and learn nothing? Yeah, I learned nothing. And God goes, guess what? Meeny, tucker, you parson. You've been weighed and you're pathetic. Your life ends tonight. Wait, what? No. It's over. And that's the end of chapter 5. Merry Christmas. Now in chapter 6. That's the background. God wanted you to see Daniel versus his 3 friends, contrasted to Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazzar. Look at the dichotomy. Dichotomy is at least his 3 friends of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They may not have been as spiritually adept as Daniel was, but at 16 years later, they sure enough showed their weathers. They sure enough showed their wares when they stood toe-to-toe with Nebuchadnezzar in the face of fear, intimidation, and they showed simply courage and bravery and strong maturity of their faith and said, doesn't matter. And they immediately bowed and worshiped God. The contrary, okay, 16 years apart of spiritual growth, but still they grew to this place that Daniel was. What about Nebuchadnezzar? Did he stay true to form? No. He kept this roller coaster lifestyle with God. And what was the result of that? His son. Never once did he show an uptick of his faith in God. None. Nebuchadnezzar showed 3 upticks. Interaction with Daniel, interaction with 3 Hebrew children, interaction with God himself. At least he showed some upticks to learning. Sure, he didn't learn initially like he's supposed to, but how many of us have learned the hard way from God? God tells us and we still do the wrong thing, and then he tells us again, still do the wrong thing, and he ups the ante on us and gets it more traumatic, and then we go, okay, now I get it, God. I get it. I think Nebuchadnezzar, I give him a hall pass a little bit because he doesn't know who God is. He wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a Hebrew. He'd fall off the cart every time he was told, but at least at the end of his life, at least, I give him credit for that. End of his life, he ended the right way. He said, you know what, boy, I got this all wrong. And his son, though, unfortunately, it was too late for him. Because his son didn't appreciate the full gamut of his dad's journey. He chose to rather take the dominant majority of what his dad lived and forget those speckled little salt areas of God's preserving his life and putting some good things in his life of understanding and acclimating and agreeing who God is. He chose to overlook that and just mirror the overarching majority of his life represented, which was self-grandizement and self-absorption in his own self-righteousness and narcissistic behavior. So his son just followed that. So his son has a reason to say, well, my dad, well, true, your dad did lead by example the same way, but you forget about those earmarked moments he had, and you're also forgetting how he died. So and that's why Daniel's like, I'm not going to use your dad as an excuse, nice try. Your dad didn't have the greatest example in the world, but he did have enough examples to give to you, God did in his life, and he ended the right way, so you're without excuse. It's like, wow. So much for the son blaming the dad, or your parents, your kid blaming you. Daniel's like, I don't want to hear it. There was enough evidence in his life to give you reason to pause, and you didn't even pause. You didn't even consider it. You didn't even care. And that's why you die tonight. What? Yeah, it's over, brother. It's over. Not chapter 5. So God goes, okay, chapter 5 is over now. So king, now we speed up the timeline. Now we're at 539 BC. Chapter 4 covered, again, this sense of, right after chapter 3, this year of him reflecting, then it fast forwards, end of his tenure. We're talking about a good 586 to 555, BC. We're talking about a 30-year gap in between chapters 4 and 5. And at the end of chapter 5, as he fast forwards toward the end of it, we see his life ends. There's a gap there between chapters 4 and 5, between these other 3 kings in there, from 562 to 553. Another gap of 9 years in there, showing the completion of Belshazzar. Not only did he have 18, see his dad restored, but he had 9 years to reflect while he wasn't king, how he would rule as king. And he still didn't. He had so many chances God gave him. Saul's dad had based at age 11. Saul's dad restored at age 18. Had 9 years to reflect on other 3 kings between him and his dad and him, to learn, understand, and learn what's the way that I want to go. Because the 3 after my dad didn't give a hoot about God of Israel, the God of Daniel. But my dad made it clear to me that he's the king of heaven. That's the last thing that's recorded about him saying that God wanted us to know in the book of Daniel, that Daniel wrote down. So where's your excuse, Belshazzar? And that's why Daniel says, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear, well, I was raised in an abusive home life and you don't understand. And my mom and daddy always said, and mama, shut your mouth, man. See God's hand or don't. You can give all excuses that you want. I have sympathy for you, but I'm not going to give you an excuse. There's no hall pass. You knew. And Daniel says that. You knew. Your pride, your narcissistic behavior, your attitude of arrogance, that's 100% you. It's not your dad's fault. It's no one's fault but yours. Look in the mirror. That is your fault. No one put a gun to your head and said, oh, worship these vessels as your God. No one said, ignore Daniel. You chose to ignore your dad. You chose to ignore Daniel. And you chose to be self-absorbed. Yes or no? What's that? Speak up? Yes. And that's why your life ends tonight. That was all you. And you know it. And then boom, that's what happened. His life ended that night. And that's when all of a sudden now we ended up by telling you at the end of chapter 5, it says, in that night Belshazzar, the verse 30, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom of being about 62 years old, basically. So this is where I want to start chapter 6 and remind you where we're at now. We're now at the 539 BC time, right? This is when Cyrus, known as Cyrus the Great, takes over as the Medes and Persian king. We no longer have the head of gold in Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, he gone. And his 3 other kings after him, then his son. So the 4 in total after Nebuchadnezzar. There was him, there was 3 others, and there was his son. So 5 total, gone. Then we have now the Medes and Persians taken over, started by Cyrus. And he's called Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great comes in, bam! Now here's the thing about Cyrus. Cyrus, he comes in, and what you don't really probably realize is that when Cyrus was here, his father was Persian, but his mother was a Mede. Now, it was Mede, which is why they have the Medes and Persians. They were, a united group. That's why it's called the Medo-Persian Empire. But here's the thing. I told you last time we talked about chapter 5, was at the end of this chapter 5, that Darius the Mede was not King Darius, who was later on reigning after, because he got Cyrus, got Cambyses, right? Then you have Darius, then you have Xerxes, then you have Artaxerxes, then you have Darius II on the back end of that. So you have Darius is after Cyrus and Cambyses, and there's Darius. So it can't be Darius now, the king of the kingdom of the Persian Empire. No, it's not him. This is why it says Darius the Mede. And I mentioned to you that what I didn't know, I'm just being honest with you, the more I study this, it's more confounding than I realized. So not only is it not I knew it wasn't Darius the First he's talking about. That I knew. What I didn't know is that there's a similitude here of how it's kind of like a typology. I didn't know it until you read chapter 6. Chapter 6 becomes a typology. What God is going to show you, what I'm going to look at, say chapter 6, is God's going to show us the typology of chapter 6 is about the millennial reign. And it's about how the kingdom of God under the Father and the Son. The Son is the one, obviously, and God the Son, Jesus, the Messianic reign at the day of the Lord takes place first, and then the day of God takes place as the Father in the day of God, right? We know this, right? This is what chapter 6 is elaborating on in typology. Well, if I didn't know that, and I didn't when I started studying, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I just want to read and have God expound as he expounds. I don't want anything to lead me or sway me. I want to just continue to go and read through, yes, but not re-engineer things that aren't there. So I said, okay, I know it's not Darius the ruler. That's still true. But it's not a separate person, Darius the Mede, from Cyrus the Great. It's the same person. I'm like, wait, what? See, I didn't get that. See, I knew Darius the Mede wasn't Darius the king, who came after Cyrus, Cambyses, and then is Darius the first. I knew that. That part's true. What I didn't know is that Darius the Mede is another terminology they used for Cyrus the Great. You're going, wait, what? By the way, thing that kind of frees your mind on this, don't believe me. Go to your Septuagint, chapter 11. You'll see how, compared to your King James. Ready for some shock and your eyeball to go like this? You'll see Septuagint, Daniel 11, say in the year of Cyrus, whereas in your King James it says in the year of Darius. Interesting, isn't it? Is the Septuagint that wrong? No. No. Because the word Darius means royal one, just so you know. It means royal one. And Cyrus did have a father who was Persian and a mother who was Mede. And so therefore when it says Darius the Mede, it could be translated, because the word Darius could mean the name Darius, or it could also mean a demarcation for the name royal, for the adjective or the description of royal one. And he was the royal one. He was Cyrus the Great. He was the first king of the Medo-Persian Empire. However, also find in Daniel 9 that Darius is the son of Ahasuerus. Another conundrum. Neither one of those interpretations of people say, well, it's King Darius or it's Cyrus. They don't fit the literal interpretation of that, because if you're talking about Ahasuerus, you're going to go with Xerxes or Artaxerxes. Well, guess what? Both came after Darius. So how can he be the son of that which was after him? What you don't realize is Ahasuerus, another play on words, is a name given to that which is prince or chief, which is the truth that he did come from royal line. He did come from a line of kings. Cyrus and the rest of them come from a royal line. So, yes, correct. So wow, that new Darius, so that therefore, I was correct in telling you that chapter 5, Darius the Mede, is not King Darius of the Persian Empire. That is correct. What I was not correct on was saying he's a separate person, and not he is, but I didn't connect him to Cyrus the Great until after further going in chapter 6. So I was studying for it. I'm like, this is insane. Because what you can't get around is there's times where it says King Darius, and the real problem you have of the two different people is the end of chapter 6. The last verse, chapter 6, when it says, this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Excuse me? Why are you mentioning both of them? This is clearly two different people. Now, you are mentioning King Darius, as in the king, where Daniel died. Daniel died under King Darius's reign. We talked about this last time we got together in the book of Daniel. Remember, Daniel was 79 years of age. Darius, King Darius, he started to reign in 522 BC, which would make Daniel about 96 years of age. People in Jewish historical fashion all agree that Daniel was between the age of 90 to 100 when he died, which means he died under the reign of Darius the First, which means that chapter 6, the last verse makes sense. He's given you a projection of, as it said in chapter 1 of Daniel. In chapter 1, verse 21, it says, then Daniel continued unto the first year of King Cyrus. Meaning, that's when he had influence, and that's when he still had a station. And yet, in chapter 6 of 28, it says that Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Interesting. Because he said Cyrus the Persian. Why? To differentiate from his other name, Darius the Mede. They wanted to make sure you knew that Cyrus the Persian is referring to the king's name proper, and he was the first king of the Medo-Persian Empire, Cyrus the Great. But Darius, his reign, as he separates the conjunctive Hebrew word here, you can't dispute that. He's not elaborating on the first statement. He's combining. So he's saying there's two different kings here. So which Darius is this? This is not the Darius from chapter 5, Darius the Mede. This is the Darius that came after Cyrus, after Cambyses. This is Darius the first, who came later, the one that Daniel died under his rule. He wants us to know that Daniel was still prosperous under the Medo-Persian Empire from Cyrus to Cambyses to Darius. That's what he wants us to know. I'm going to elaborate for you what that means in typology, but you have to understand that. He's talking about, just so you know, the day of the Lord, day of God, and keep in mind this. Why does chapter 5 end with Darius the Mede? Why does it start off chapter 6 by saying, and it pleased Darius to raise up over the kingdom 120 princes, of which should be over the whole kingdom. He's talking about, in this sense of it, God is using Cyrus the Great to show you a contrast to Darius. He's skipping right over Cambyses. He's sticking with the idea of Cyrus and Darius because Darius is a name that means royal one, and Cyrus the Great was the royal one, the first ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire. Ahasuerus is a name like they use of the word Pharaoh, or the word Ramses is used universally, of a person, yes, distinctly, but also of a title, because it means prince or chief. He was the son of a prince and chief. Both of them were, Cyrus and Darius. Then you get to the place of, okay, well, wait a minute. What about what this means when it comes to chapter 6? The idea here is that Cyrus plays the role of God the Son, Jesus, and how he's appointing people over his kingdom. Daniel's going to represent to you a faithful one who was given a precious faith promise. And there's 5 groups of people that come against him. 5. There's 2 presidents. Because he appoints 3, it says, which Daniel's his favorite. And it says those other presidents, which are the other 2, those who are the other mature ones who betray. There's also princes. Those are the 30 fruit yield people, less mature, who don't stay true to form. We also know there's foolish virgins who become unjust stewards. Those are those other governors. Then we have Israel, which is the counselors, those who are, again, answering to God as the remnant ones of the millennial reign. And then there's these other captains that are under governors, representing those earthly ones that actually are the ones the unjust steward is giving orders to, as we saw in Luke 16. You need 100 cores of wheat. You need 100 baths of oil. You guys are short because a captain is under a governor. And they're trying to help them out. So these, all 5 of these people, those presidents and those princes, not all princes, those, not all 30 fruit, but some 30 fruit, and 2 of the mature 60 fruit people, which is ideally, reminds me of how many of the apostles betrayed Jesus? Oh, that's right, 2 of them did. Judas and Peter. Ooh, what a coincidence. How do I know there's 2? Because it says, right here in chapter 6, verse 2, and over these 3 presidents of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage, which means no harm. Which means no harm physically, no harm politically. He wanted to set up 120. And by the way, 120. 120 what? Presidents? No. Princes. Princes. So why 120? What a coincidence. Because 30 goes into 120 4 times. And 4 is a number for the kingdom, for the inheritance. This is showing you that there is a group of people here and be disinherited amongst those who are 30 fruit yield. There's this group that gets together and they get kind of jealous and they get involved, being sinless, they get involved in the affairs of the earth, the cares of this world, suck them in, and they lose their inheritance. The story of Daniel and the others reminds me of, similar to Esther, another woman brought to kings for his service, is Daniel type of Esther. It was interesting enough, to your point, did you know this, that Vashti is the granddaughter of Belshazzar? who's also mentioned, as we know, as the first queen in the book of Esther, before Xerxes, who was killed. Her lineage ain't so good, right? So she's the granddaughter of Belshazzar. So her granddaddy was a moron. And she knows her granddaddy and didn't follow her great-grandfather. And so her granddaddy was drop dead Fred because God put a hand on the wall saying, Mini Mini Tekka Parson, as a granddaughter, that's your legacy as your grandfather. That's what she has to deal with. So yeah, there is a connection here. There's some connection, but just to your point, yes, there is some connection here. But I wouldn't say he's a type for Esther, but there's some similitude of overbleeding things that do carry over in some applications here. Jeremiah mentions that, Nehemiah, Esther, yes, there's some carryover here. But we're staying with the book of Daniel, chapter 6. So he says here, he raises up 120 princes. Again, 30 is the number for the lower fruit yield. 30 is into 120, 4 times, showing you this aspect of these 30 who are going to fall short of the kingdom of their inheritance, because even made sinless, when they enter the kingdom of the heavens, they have to continue to produce another measure of fruit yield. And these particular, that's why it says later on, chapter 6, these, not all princes, these princes fell into the conspiracy of being sinless and then being also sin infecting them by the sin on the earth they had to interact with. They got, unfortunately, stained by the sin of what was alive and well, those who were procreating, and they were supposed to help them and adhere to them to help them spiritually. They got too involved. And some of this was their downfall, as we see. And the lion's den, representing the judgment of sin, which ultimately is, in fact, the lake of fire for those who know God and don't obey. I'm not talking about Jehoshaphat. That's for those who don't know God at all. Those who know God. Those who know God and live in sin, the ultimate judgment is lake of fire. But what happens first? Disinheritance happens first. And then you're judged. That's how it works. You're judged at the Bema seat. Not your ultimate judgment, though, is it? Your judgment at the Bema seat is to determine your inheritance. But your ultimate judgment, the carrying out of your judgment, is like a fire. But you're carrying out that judgment as the son of disobedience because you were ultimately now disinherited. And when you have the ultimate disinheritance, once you get judged by the great white throne as well, Bema seat first, 1,000 years later, great white throne for those on the earth, under the earth, those in the sea of glass. When you get judged there, then you're going to lake of fire because you're now ultimately disinherited. Those who have their part in the lake of fire, Revelation 21:8, have their part, their meros. Those who have their part like a fire are ultimately already disinherited, and this is their final culmination of that judgment. Which is why, at the end of the story, we're going to get there, their bones are broken before the lions consume them. And it says Daniel was pulled up out of the lion's den. It's not a hole in the wall like a cave. It was a down pit. A pit. Sound familiar to you? Because lake of fire is a pit. Hades, Gehenna, lake of fire at the depth of the abyss, the lowest pit. Daniel was thrown into the pit of the lion's den. That's why he was taken up. He ascended out. Later on, we're going to read that. The lion's den is a word picture of the lake of fire, and the lions are the representation of sin that overcomes you. And only God can stay the consequence of sin. Only God can overcome sin. And that's why God sent his angel to close their mouths. Meaning sin has no effect on Daniel. None. How? I thought in the day 7 we're all subjected to still get stained with sin. Not the precious faith promised ones. That's why he was called later on a pure one, it says. Same Greek word as aspilos, anakaliktos. So we're going to get to that. Let's go back and read chapter 6, though, and continue to see this come. I want to see that. I want you to get the word picture out ahead, so when we get there, you can go, oh my gosh. So let's continue to read this. Esther's Jewish, absolutely. No, not Esther. No. Vashti. If I said Esther, I was wrong. Vashti is the granddaughter of Belshazzar, not Esther. I was saying in the book of Esther. I apologize if I said that wrong. In the book of Esther, Vashti is the granddaughter of Belshazzar. Not Esther, of course. Esther's Jewish. Sorry about that. If I said that, that's just my being ignorant and sinful and it's a mistake. So, Chapter 6 and verse 2, and over these three presidents, he wants to set up 120 princes. And he said over the whole kingdom, over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give account unto him, that the king should have no damage. Again, the purpose of this was to have a order of things. Sounds a lot similar to the Messianic kingdom, doesn't it? Because there's going to be those who enter, those who are heirs, those who are on the earth with bodies of sin and death, those in the heavens. There's an order of things. That is what he's telling you. He says have no damage. What he means is, just like the similitude to the Messianic reign. Will Jesus rule with a high priest mentality of forgiveness of sins? No. Iron scepter. Sounds like he's having no harm come to his name. Ha ha! That sounds eerily familiar to me. That during the Messianic reign, he ain't playing with you. Remember Hebrews 6? You can't re-crucify him again. The blood sacrifice of the crucifixion is always, always there and available. And it's always effectuous. Until the effectuousness never loses its power. But the availability is put on hold during the Messianic reign. Why? Because he left the high priesthood ministry in chapter 8 of Revelation, when he threw the censer of fire, he had Gabriel thrown on the earth and said, the wrath of the Lamb is coming. Who is able to stand? And the answer is, no one. You think this is funny? He goes from high priest to righteous judge, and he comes back, boom, as king. He goes, high priest, I'm always prophet, priest, and king, and righteous judge. I'm not acting as all those at the same time. And in the Messianic reign, he'll be the righteous king. He's not going to be acting as high priest, giving you this clemency of forgiveness. No. That's why he rules with the iron scepter, which means he causes no harm to his name. What a coincidence. Chapter 6 is talking about the reason behind this order he's putting forth is to have no harm come to him, physically or reputation-wise. What a coincidence. Yeah, right, sure. Coincidence. Okay. Keep going. Chapter 6, verse 3. Then this Daniel was preferred. I love this word. You ever remember the old black and white movies? And we just got finished watching Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart, you know. All that. That movie is kind of interesting. I love the overall message, but there's some quirky things in it. It's like, brr. But I still like the overall message. But it reminded me of the old ways in which people talked, how they acted. And obviously there was a shine, as we call it, right? Is that, oh, she took a shining to him. That means that she likes him. Or he took a shine to her. That means that he likes her, right? Well, this word here in the Hebrew, when it says that Daniel was preferred or became preeminent in the Septuagint, is the word misach. And it means he had an enduring shine, which means Daniel was such a way of living at 79 years of age. He had such a aura about him, such a reputation about him, such a way he handled himself, how he spoke, how he walked, how he talked, everything about him. It made Cyrus the Great, known as Darius the Mede, he took a shine to Daniel, and the word is written in the sense that it was an enduring shine. Meaning it was an enduring likability that made him like him more and more and more as the days and weeks and months and years passed by. He never lost this love of him. Not homosexually, endearingly, as a affinity of a godly man, as a good man that is a great asset to his kingdom. Speaks to Jesus, the bridegroom, having an ongoing shine, enduringly, ongoingly for his bride. It never loses its luster. It doesn't get dull like we do sometimes in our relationships and our marriages and whatever it is. God goes, I'm no human. You guys do that. I don't do that. The shine he has toward us as the bridegroom to the bride never loses its luster. How awesome is that? That's a word picture here, what's going on here. So then, that's verse 3 of chapter 6. That this Daniel was preferred, became preeminent above the presidents, Daniel 6, verse 3, above the presidents and princes, because why? Because an excellent spirit, which is preeminent, different, distinct, extraordinary, was in him. And watch this now. And the king thought to set him over the whole realm. And that phrasing in the Hebrew means he thought to appoint it so he would establish him over the whole thing. So in other words, he was like the Rachel. Leah knew when she walked in the room, Jacob's eyes were like, "Whoa, that's my girl." And that's why Leah said, "I feel slighted or hated." Remember, lesser loved? Because she did. Because she was. Because Leah put his wood on fire, even if his wood was wet. She was like his muse, more to his muse. She lit his fire, Jack. She was his love. Well, they all knew. The two other presidents, because there's three, remember? The two other presidents knew that they didn't have a shine that Cyrus the Great, Darius the Medes known as, didn't have a shine to them like he did to Daniel. And the princes knew that as well. The 120 knew that, boy, he really likes this guy a lot. Like a lot. So much so, he wants to appoint and establish him over all of us. This sounds eerily familiar to what Nebuchadnezzar did. Yeah, you think? Which also brings to mind that more than likely, when Nebuchadnezzar fell out of favor, well, say died, excuse me, and the three other kings after him for those 9 years, leading up to Belshazzar for his 14-year reign, during that entire 23 years, Daniel was not in that station. Why would he be? Because none of those other kings between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar were godly. Belshazzar certainly didn't honor God. So for those 23 years, Daniel was not in the station that he was with Nebuchadnezzar, overseeing all things, answering only to the king. But now, under the Medes and Persian Empire, God is introducing to you again a similitude of what already has happened. Betrothed bride, revealed bride. Sound familiar? But in between, there's this gap of enduring those that don't recognize you as that. Those that maybe have some resentment. You say why God told Philadelphia, hold fast lest no one take your crown. He told them that. Interesting. Because people are jockeying for the faithful ones to fall. But they can't fall. Which is why, in Revelation chapter 3, God says, I'll make those the synagogue of Satan go pay homage to you. Now some people who are ignorant and willfully ignorant want to sit here and tell me, well, Philadelphia had something against them too. It says there were people in the synagogue of Satan. No, it does not. You are lying. No, it doesn't. Just to make reference to these people who think that, Philadelphia is the only letter that written to the churches, the called out ones in Revelation. It's the only one where he has nothing against them. You try to make that up, then I don't care what you want to say, you are lying and you get slapped in the face. Stop lying. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, behold, I'm giving up to those from the assembly of the adversary who declare themselves to be Jews and are not, but speak falsely. Behold, I will make them to come and pay homage before your feet and to know that I loved you. Where do you get that in verse 9, chapter 3? He's talking to Philadelphia as the synagogue of Satan. Can you not read English? They're the ones who come to them in Philadelphia and pay homage. You don't read proper English? You don't understand proper grammar and the Koine Greek? Philadelphia is the ones that are getting the homage by those who are not of Philadelphia, synagogue of Satan, coming to them. Now the preachers teach you, well, that's Philadelphia, synagogue of Satan. No, are you dumb? Now you're irritating me, because you're being willfully, belligerently, arrogant, and disobedient to God's word. And you know you are. There is nobody on God's green earth with an honest heart and with a discerning mind and with eyes to see and ears to hear is going to read chapter 3, especially verse 9, and go, well, the synagogue of Satan is those in Philadelphia. No, it's not. It's those that are not in Philadelphia who had an animus to pick with them, and now God makes them pay homage to Philadelphia. He makes that extremely clear. Why you don't want to see it? Because you're willfully ignorant. And the defense they give is, well, everybody's a sinner, nobody's perfect, everybody has something against them, surely they have something against them. That ain't the point. The point is, did Jesus say anything to Philadelphia of a negative reality of something against them? Yes or no? The answer is no. Don't you dare go, well, everybody's not perfect, so therefore I'm going to assume that this is them. Did Jesus mention a negative connotation to Philadelphia? And the answer is no. I get sick of it when people want to lie because they fight so hard for a narrative, but they fight little for the integrity of God and His Word. You disgust me. If you're a teacher, preacher, and you're doing that, you're disgusting. And you're disappointing before God and man. Remove yourself from your station of teaching because you are a disgusting person. Your narrative matters more than God and His Word. Are you out of your mind? God, so stupid. Okay, I'm just telling you it is. I'm just frustrated beyond belief. But Daniel, God's ordained all that, right? So hey, it's in His hands. But boy, I don't like it. So, all right, so then it says there is no thought in verse 3 in the Septuagint, right? Because the word thought is not really a word in the Hebrew because it actually means to appoint. And that's the reason why it's not there. And then but in the King James it says thought, but about making Daniel correct. Because that's not an actual word in the Hebrew language. The word, if you look it up, the word means to appoint. Which is why when you say the word thought to your point, Brother Todd, it's not there in the original language in Daniel 6 in verse 3. It's not there. It should say, because again, actually the Spirit was in him, and the king appointed to raise him up over the whole realm. That's what it should say. Because that's what he was saying in the Hebrew language. Great point. Then in verse 4, then it says the presidents, what presidents? Remember, there's only 3, and Daniel's the one that he has a shine to, Cyrus the Great, who's known as Darius the Mede, which means the other 2, which typify those who are betrayers of the 60 fruit yield that they have, which means they're the rare oddity. The majority are going to succeed onwardly, but there's always an outlier, which is why the precious faith promise is only on the 100 fruit. The majority of 60 fruit will make it in to the bride, but there are some outliers, and that's why he's talking about these 2 other presidents, which are seen as high-level mature ones, and princes sought, which means this word sought means they're in a constant state of looking. They're in a constant state of trying to justify, the old self-fulfilled prophecy. If you look to find fault in me, guess what? It'll take you no more than 2 seconds to find tons of faults with me. If your predisposition is already, he's a jerk, he's a butt, he's a this, he's a that, then it's a matter of time before my sinful nature validates what you're already predisposing upon me. It's the same for me to you, right? If I see you as self-absorbed or self-righteous or holier than thou or a Bible thumper, if I already see you with a disposition, then I'm looking for things it's called affirmation bias, confirmation bias, right? Affirmation bias. I already have a bias in my mind. I'm looking for confirmation to feed into my .com disposition what I already believe. Which is why people that go on internet, TikTok and YouTubes and all sorts of stuff, well, look, I say, look, this says this said this. That proves I'm right. No, moron, it just proves other people think just like you. It's a search engine, not an answer engine, you moron. So when you search, it tells you other people that searched for the same thing. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means you searched for it, and so did some of the other people search for it. So on. So on. So what about that? So when folks say, I did my own research, you should do your own research. What research is that you do? Exactly. You watched some videos, did you? Really? Do you have critical thinking? Did you? I'll tell you what, if you're a person in Christ who's claiming you did your own research, you have this wackadoodle belief system out there, and you're going to sit here and tell me that, then why is it that I ask you a question, what are you studying now about God and His Word? Go ahead, tell me. And you go, well then you're lying to yourself. Just pointing you. You're lying to yourself. And you're a useful idiot to guess who? Satan! He's playing like a fiddle. You're going, no, I'm not. I'm aware, I'm awake. No, you're butt asleep, buddy. You are butt naked asleep at the wheel. And he has taken you to task. Remember, he took Eve, a superior, intelligent, wonderful human being who was without sin. And he convinced her in a conversation to entice himself to her. And if you could take her to task and make deception of her and pervert her into being with him, what chance do you got? Are you superior to her? No. And your intellect? No, you're not. Were you sinless when you get tempted to sin? No. She was sinless. She was superior. She was Googleplex smart. But she was child's play to Satan. Child's play. He was like, this is nothing. He deceived sinless celestials. Of course he deceived a sinless human. That's nothing to him. He's like, it's nothing. Nothing. But yet we arrogant, pompous jerks think that, oh, he won't deceive me. I'm aware because I watch TikTok and YouTube and Facebook. And that's why you're deceived. Read your Bible. Study the Word of God. My gosh. It's so, ugh. So then when you get to this, verse 5. Oh, sorry, verse 4. Verse 4. These presidents eunuchs sought, they continue in a state of continual, wanting to find an occasion. And the word there is a great word. It says pretext in the exegesis, which means a narrative. It has the idea of a narrative. They already had a disposition. They wanted to get him. They were looking for reasons to get him, you see. Did they not like him because of what they found about him? No, they didn't like him. And now they're looking for reasons to validate why they don't like him. Do you see the bouncing ball here? Why don't they like him? Because the king, Cyrus the Great, known as Darius the Mede, took a shine to Daniel. That made them jealous, made them envious. So because they didn't like him, because of nothing he did wrong, they don't like him because of what he means to the king. And they want that shine. So because they don't like him, now they're looking for reasons to validate what they already are predisposed to think. They're not thinking they don't like him because they have a reason to. No, because they don't want to. Because of what he's taking from them. They want the shine. They want the status. Envy much? Jealousy much? Self-righteous much? Narcissistic, arrogant jerks. So then, what do? They have a pretext, it says, against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But in verse 4, they could not find none. None! It says here, there's no narrative they could find, they could spin. Watch this now. It says in verse 4, nor fault, which means corruption. There was nothing he did that could be spun as a sinful thing. Nothing he did or said. Then it says, for as much as he was faithful, which is trustworthy, neither was there any error, which is the word shalu, which means he didn't neglect any of his responsibilities, meaning there was no sense of commission and no sense of omission. They're like, man, I'm fresh out, man. We hate this dude. We're looking for a thing to validate our predisposed hatred for him. There's those in the kingdom of the heavens, in the Messianic reign, who are on the earth of sin and death, earthly ones, the Israelites. And there's those unjust stewards who are then not going to act the right way, as the one did in Luke 16. There's many that don't act that way. There's other 30 fruit people who do not repent and get their wicks right and get their oil extra measure to enter in. And there's a few mature ones who all conspire together, stained by sin, to have a preset narrative because they're jealous that they have a precious faith promise, that they aren't the betrothed. Instead of just looking at their own life and being circumspectly, they're getting jealous of someone else's life because God, the Son, has a shine toward them. Well, no kidding. But the betrothed bride, of course he does. It's an enduring shine. Of course it is. Why don't you, instead of being jealous, why don't you try to be the same as them? How about that? There's your solution. What do I do with that? I just told you how to deal with it. They didn't earn that. They were given that. So why don't you try to ask God for the same thing? Why don't you just be the best person you can be by serving and loving on God, getting to know him, doing what you're supposed to do. But instead, it says they couldn't find any corruption in him, nor any negligence in him, or again, they said a second time, no corruption in him. Which is why it says he prays 3 times a day. This goes back to Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5:23. May the Lord preserve your spirit, soul, and body blameless in the parousia of the Lord. Daniel's praying 3 times a day, showing that the faithful ones, because of the precious faith promise, are praying 3 times a day. They are sustaining their spirit, soul, and body. Which is why the word corruption is used twice. He wasn't corrupted in soul or in body. Because the spirit is preserved by God. It's the soul that gets corrupted by the body, or vice versa. spirit either made alive or it's dead. In this case, it's alive. Interesting enough, as we see this here in verse 5. Then he said, these mighty men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel. And the word occasion is, again, pretext or reason. They're looking for a reason. They're looking for a narrative. They can't find one. They're frustrated. Verse 6, then these presidents and these princes assembled together to conspire. Conspire. They met together to conspire. Interesting. Which it says here, they met together, assembled together. In the Septuagint, it says conspire, because that's what that word means. They were together trying to strategize a way from which they could collectively, between the mature ones, those few that betrayed, the 30 fruit that did not pursue the extra measure of oil, the actual unjust stewards who didn't want to do the right thing and help others, the Israelites who were the counselors who were in sin and death, who then married into the others, right? You have earthly ones as well, so you have tares involved here too. They are looking at ways to take down the faithful one because they're jealous, because they're envious. So striving for the same thing. There's the old adage I told the grandkids long ago. I said, look, there's two ways to build people up. You can build people up by build others up around you, by building them up. You can build yourself up by building others up around you. You all rise together. Or you can build yourself up by tearing people down around you. And the latter is not suggested. As a matter of fact, it's the most often preferred of America and corporate America, and it's disgusting and not good behavior. Please don't do that. No one wins. You think you do, but you don't. You build yourself up, but others around you being built up, everybody wins. So do it that way. So instead of seeing it that way, no, they see it the other way. And the way you can do that is if you have sin, or being sinless, you have to be then stained by sin, which then comes by your interactions with those on the earth, being able to enter the heavens, the 60 fruit, 2 president typology of, and the 30 fruit, lesser maturity ones. The only way they could become into this reality is if they interact with folks on the earth and got stained by sin, which can happen. Which is why they're enterers, not inheritors. So then, which is why only the faithful ones have a precious faith promise, 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. Then, we get back to chapter 6 of Daniel, and he says here that concerning, and he says, and they could not find any reason or pretext, verse 5, chapter 6 of Daniel, against this, except we find it against him concerning the law of God. Well, what would they mean by that? So Sister Laney asked the question, how would they know the law of God? How would they know that? Well, this is where it takes time to remember the history we told you about leading into this chapter 6. Was Daniel just arriving on the scene? No. From 16 to 79, they had 66 years plus, 79 years old. So what is that? Excuse me. What is that? 63 years. They had 63 years of learning. Oh, no, 13, 66, that's right. For 13 when he first arrived in Babylon. They have 66 years of history to base his actions on, his reputation, his character. It wasn't like he wasn't known. He was known to the Babylonian kingdom, who he was. Remember, even Belshazzar didn't consult him, said, I knew of him. So it isn't like they didn't know who he was. They knew for 66 years his modus operandi. They knew how he was a testimony to the God of heaven. They knew how he and his friends, what they stood for, who they were, but it's not talking about him and his friends, it's just him. They knew, which I think at this point, maybe they predeceased him. They're not in view at all. It's just at this point, it's just Daniel. But the point is how do they know the law of God? How could they say in verse 5, the only way you can get something against him is if it's concerning the law of God? How would they know what the law of God even says? They don't. All they know is they have to find something they can use by what he does to honor God and use it to juxtapose against that which is against the Medes and Medo-Persian law, which is why they go to the king and trick him to this whole decree, right? So this is what's going on here. So it's interesting enough how, again, they know God's law because of the evidence of what they see. For example, right now, people ask me just right now, I'll give you an example of what this means. Everybody, I say 9 out of 10 people in America today who celebrate Christmas are taking decorations down Friday, yesterday, or today. They are, right? I'd say 9 out of 10, 90% take them down right after New Year's or the weekend thereafter. We leave it up till January 6th. So because of that, they know the law of God for me, or I should say the tradition, the habit is that we do that. They know why. Because they've asked me by now. All the neighbors know. Oh, the Three Kings thing, the Epiphania thing. Yes, yes. That's right. Well, it's just an homage. 12 days of Christmas, 25th, it's always January 6th. Ironically, they made that into a January 6th anti-Donald Trump thing, which is interesting. But their whole reality is it's about Three Kings Day and about the Epiphania. It's about acknowledging that the wise men weren't there at the manger scene. That we, non-Jewish people, were included in this great, wonderful day of light shining in darkness. And if I have to take decorations down one weekend later, hoo-hoo, boo-hoo, so what? So what? But it makes a point, doesn't it? Because I'm the only one on the whole block has it up still. So good. I'm glad that you recognize that. So, for example, since they know that, all they got to do, they don't have to know the law, they don't have to know what God means to me or what it means to me. They could have heard what it means to me and see how it lights up. All they got to do is go to Duke Energy and say, hey, I want someone to pay an extra fine who has Christmas lights on after January 3rd or January 4th, right? They don't have to know God's law. They have to know how I'm conducting myself under God's law, and they take my conduct, they take what I'm doing or what you're doing, and they use it against you and make rules against that. So that doesn't mean they know God's law. They know how God's law has been manifested in Daniel's actions and his behaviors and his 66 years of observations and notes have been passed on. He always does this. He never does that. He always eats this. He always says that. They know. That's how they know the law of God, not from knowing it directly, knowing it indirectly by his testimony. What they're trying to get to is his testimony, right? So then, in verse 6, then these presidents and the conspired against him, it says, again, assembled to conspire against the king. In verse, and I said unto him, King Darius, live forever. Then in verse 7, all the presidents of the kingdom, which is the 2 minus Daniel, the governors, there's your 5 people, see, presidents, governors, the princes, the counselors, and the captains, all 5 people, have consulted together. And again, the presidents are those references, the 2 people that are the betrayers, are the mature ones. The majority will have no problem achieving the 100 fruit, but there's 2. This is the minority of them will betray their calling. That's why the precious faith promise is important to have. You want no chance of backsliding, no chance of losing out on entrance to inheritance, because there's a small chance that the mature one will lose that right from 60 to 100 fruit. This is evidence of this. Then the princes are the other 30 fruits that are all subjected to God knows what, because they all have to go back and get some extra measure of oil. That's what the princes represent. Then you have those governors represent those unjust stewards who are already taken from them because they already wasted it. They're already on the earth as unjust stewards. Then you have the counselors, who are the Jewish remnant, who are the ones that again are listening. Counselors being there before Jesus to take his words of admonition to do what they're supposed to do as the Jewish people inheriting their land. And then you have those who are the captains, which are those who answer under governors, which speaks to earthy ones who answer to the unjust steward and how he's correcting them, like you saw in Luke 16. Not all of them will be this way, but some of the unjust stewards will be like the one we saw, where he's actually telling them, no. You're not counting this right. You don't have 100 cores of wheat. You don't have what you think you have. You need to get 100 cores of wheat. You think you have 100 pounds of oil? No, you don't. I'm telling you right now. I've already thought that same thing. I also presumed upon God. I also juxtaposed what I thought was self-righteousness, and it wasn't. I'm telling you, don't assume, don't presume, don't do this. I'm telling you, man. You better go back and get to working. You're short. You think you're done? You're not done. You get to working. You're not done. So these captains are under the governors, and that's the earthly ones under the unjust stewards. But yet all these 5 groups of people are typified here, coming before the king. And they consulted together to establish a royal statute to make a firm decree that whoever shall ask a petition of any god other than for 30 days, save thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Why 30 days? 30 is a number for maturity in the Bible. It just goes to show you how all these people are falling short of what Jesus said in Matthew 5:48. Be you therefore perfect, mature, as your Father in heaven is mature. Jesus said that. Our Mormon friends get that misunderstood. You can become a god. No. He means matured in your faith. Get to the 100-fruit maturity. Because right now, there's different levels of maturity based on sporos and sperma. But in the Messianic reign, there's only one maturity he's looking for. Because the 100-fold people already have their heirship. They can't lose it. Only maturity left to have is 100 fruit of the second sperma. That's it. There is no other. That's it. That's the only fruit he was looking for. That's the maturity you have to attain to. That's it. And he's saying that's what you. And these 5 groups were like, no. Okay. That's by the 30 days. I don't think that's coincidence that 30 is the number for maturity, and yet they can put this edict out there, and God's using this to show a typology of how they are kind of fall short and be found, just like Belshazzar, weighed and found lacking of their spiritual maturity. Then says, and they'll be cast into the lion's den, which is again, that is the ramifications of being disinherited, culminated in exercising your judgment of being cast into the lion's den, lions being devoured by your sin, and a den and a pit, which is a lake of fire, which is for those who are disobedience. Revelation 21, verse 8, had a portion. Chapter 6, verse 8. Now, O king, establish and the decree and sign the writing, and it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which alters not. Wherefore, King Darius signed the writing and the decree. What's that mean? That means he signed the edict, the law that said you can't call upon any other god but him as a god. But he also says that he also signed a decree, meaning I can't go against the law of Medes and Persians that says I can't change what is. This is showing you that God's basically telling you, kind of like the Gethsemane is the same thing within the millennial reign. Jesus is telling you that, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he prayed that not my will be done, but your will be done, and anyway, this cup can pass from me. He's not debating what can happen as an option that he could have said, no, I'm not doing this. No, that's not what's happening there. He's showing you the human nature of the stress of the moment, even though the will of God the Father or God the Son was agreed upon before time. He's now living it out for the first time in a body of flesh of his creation, and he's reflecting to us what that is like when he's doing that. He's not saying, I'm contemplating not doing this. That's not what's happening here. He's showing you the emotional, mental, physical strain and spiritual strain it bears on him to submit himself to the will of the Father. How much more should it be to us who are not God? Hello. That's why he did that. He's put that same word picture in the Messianic kingdom. There's going to be ways, his same clemency of being loving and kind is still going to be the same character of God. However, in his office of king, he's not going to exercise that clemency. And he's showing that dynamic here by this decree, him being symbolized by the typology of Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede. He is God, but he's acting as the Messiah on the earth, fulfilling his kingship office. Hence the reason why Darius the Mede is known as Cyrus the Great, because Jesus is known as the Messiah, as the King of the Jews, but he's still God Almighty. And because he's in this office, he's fulfilling that last office. There's restrictions around what he has already ordained for him not to be doing. He's already said, I'm not high priest during that time. But I want to forgive you. I want to be clemency towards you like I did for thousands of years. But I'm not in that state anymore. Even he is bound by his own word. That's what this is telling you about. That God is, well, anything God can't do? Well, God can't go against his character, and he can't go against his word. That's the only two things God can't do. So some of my ridiculous friends say, you're telling me that God can't cure somebody with cancer? A person can't have no arms and legs, and God can just grow them arms and legs? You don't believe God can do that? God can't do that? I'm not saying he can't. But based on your ridiculousness, can God make two trees go hump in the backyard? They can move and hump, like have physical intercourse, and produce another tree overnight? Can that happen? Well, that'd be ridiculous. No, I'm just saying, you're being ridiculous. You're saying somebody could just grow arms and legs, just like that, because God said so. Is it anything's possible, but not probable? Is it possible God can make two trees come alive, and all of a sudden just sexually have intercourse somehow? And all of a sudden the next day I see a third large grown oak tree in the backyard, and I only had two? Can that happen? You see how ridiculous that sounds? So remember, you're ridiculous. When you start saying fallaciously arrogant, ignorant things that don't make any sense. So stop. Is there a boulder too big that God can't lift it? Again, the only thing God can't do is go against his character and go against his word. So what in his character and his word would make you say he has to make limbs grow back? Or to say he has to prove that to you? Didn't Jesus say you should not test the Lord your God? What, are you deaf? There's a time and a place where he did miracles, and he made it clear when he was here on this earth. And he told you there was many that were widows in Elijah's day, but he went to the one widow. There was many in Elisha's day that had leprosy. He went to the one. What, are you deaf? He told you. He does what he wants, when he wants, however he wants. He's under zero obligation, zero, to do it on demand or to dictate to him because you did it once. That means you can do it all the time you want. No, 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 no. Don't you take outlier things that I do and act like I could do them all the time. He doesn't do Sodom and Gomorrah. He doesn't fire and brimstone rain down more than once. He didn't do a flood more than once. Come on, he didn't walk on water and then say, okay, you can too. Peter did it for a little bit. Anybody else doing it after him? No. So would you stop? It's just so ridiculous. It's people just, it's childlike behavior like that I just don't want to be a part of. You want to talk like a child and be a child and stay a child all you want to stay. But you're not growing in God's word. You're not. You know you're not. So have fun, but don't come talking to me. If you want to be childish and frivolous and ignorant like that, that just shows me that you're doing the whole thing. When I was younger, people used to say, talk about Jesus and going into this, they went into this sacrilegious thing about things about he doesn't have a last name and his genitalia. I'm like, you're getting sacrilegious and you're on thin ice. Stop it. Well, he's a man. I don't care about that. I do care about that, but not in the sense that you're talking about. Stop it. You're getting involved in all, they were saying in a very sacrilegious way, and people start doing this childish mentality and this childish conversation and this childish, immature mindset about, well, God could do anything. No kidding, doofus. All things are possible, not all things are probable. God can make a giant squid start walking on the earth and talk like a human. God can make sharks have arms and legs, walk out of the ocean and start talking to us. But is it probable he can do that? It's possible. Anything's possible. But is it probable he'll do that? No. So don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. Don't start saying because all things are possible with God, therefore everything's probable with God. No, it's not. There's two different things. Why would he do that? Makes sense. And this is the problem they have. All things are possible, therefore to them, it is probable because they want the impossible. Well, that's where you err. Because you're focusing on your own selfish pride and your own selfish greediness and your self-righteousness and your indignant sense of he owes it to me or he loves me so much, he will do this. How dare you? How dare you talk to God like that? Even Nebuchadnezzar knew that's a bad way to go. He's a Gentile, and he knew not a good thing. I would not advise you to tell God what he owes you or what you can dictate he should do for you. And Nebuchadnezzar learned real quickly how that was a wrong way of thinking. So with that being said, we're going back to our scripture in Daniel chapter 6. Then we get to verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house. And his windows were being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem. He knelt upon his knees, and 3 times a day he prayed and gave thanks. That means and the way it words it this way, the way it words it when it says, as he did before time, it means it was his custom. For 66 years, he's the same as it ever was, man. He said, I'm not doing this because of what y'all just did. I've been doing this. You know, the same reason that you saw me doing this, you heard about me doing this, and you knew about this, and that's why you wrote this decree. You know doggone well what I've been doing for 66 years. Under Babylonian captivity, under those kings Nebuchadnezzar, the 3 Yahoos, and his son Belshazzar, and now under Cyrus, like it's going to change my behavior. You know where to find me, Jack. You know when to find me. You don't want me. I'll be doing. You know what? I'll be praying. You know when. You know where. And you know what. You know, because for 66 years I haven't changed on my iota. It's been what I've been. So in the reign of Jesus Christ, not judge or priest, the laws that are in place, then are what? The 10 Commandments and the extra 2 that Jesus added, or are the laws different? It's the Aaronic priesthood is now taken over again. All the same sacrifices and offerings of the sin offering, they have to bring forth a sin offering of a lamb. There's the burnt offering. There's the trespass offering. There's the grain offering. And there's the peace offering. All those are back in play again. It's a great question, Sister Vicky. But all the laws that were a part of the Mosaic law, not just the Ten Commandments, or love your Lord your God, by your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and every as yourself. That's all true. But it's all those Mosaic laws, all those integral governmental, social, interactive laws are all in place again. And particularly those sacrifices are all back in play. Well, why would you do that if Jesus paid for your sin debt? Because you're no longer able to have your sins forgiven. All you can do now is push them forward year after year after year until the great white throne, where he then comes back with that sense of, okay, now I will judge you based upon how you conducted yourself under the Aaronic priesthood, because you do not have the ability with the infectious blood that's always infectious. You couldn't access it because I was no longer high priest. That's the only reason, the only way we can access the blood of Christ to forgive us and cleanse us, is by him as our advocate. He's saying, guess what? Do I look like I'm in the heavenly? Am I in the Holy of Holies right now? Am I high priest? No. He's king. He's like, I'm not doing that right now. I'm not doing that. You're done. So getting with the Aaronic priesthood. I suggest you go get with the Jews and ask them what to do, because you Gentiles don't know diddly squat. Go get with them and they'll tell you what you have to do. But that's how you got to get right. You sinned. Go get right. Go get right. That's it. That's what's going on. So it's not going to be a pleasant time. Animals will be dying. People will be dying. People say, oh my gosh, in the millennium, there's no sin. Yes, there is. Revelation 20, verse 9. There's a ton of people as the sand of the sea coming against the camp of the saints that align with Satan. Where do those sinners come from if there's no sin? Right? Folks don't even want to talk about that, but that's the reality of it. So, with that being said, Daniel goes back and he says, as soon as he knew the writing was signed, opens his doors, it was his windows, I should say, his windows. It's almost his way of saying, it's his open way of saying, I'm afraid of no man. I know what you did. He knew what they did. He goes, I know. Look at, do you imagine this? He is boldly, with tenacity, saying, come and get me. He's not hiding at all. I mean, he is really brazen about it. He's not afraid of nothing. He's like, yeah, if my worship toward God that I've been doing for 66 years is going to be held against me, then so be it. I'm going to do it like I always did, but this time, my window's up so y'all can see clearly. I ain't changed a bit. My habits, my conditioning, my moral, ethical, principle, integrity of honoring and worshiping God won't change one iota. Like those who said, you can't worship during COVID. You can't come together. And people still did. Good. And then they sued those governments and they're winning. There's a lady right now who's suing because of other things, because of a teacher not being, she didn't want to use the improper pronouns, and she won that case recently. Good. But look at the time it took. A lot of years where they were made fun of, they were ostracized, they were criminalized. Can you take that type of stance? Because I'd be like Daniel, but were you during COVID? Were you? That's a small shot of what Daniel was going through right now. Your life wasn't at risk of not taking the shot, not complying with rules that were going to kill you. That wasn't the recourse. That was his recourse. Either submit or die. And he's like, I'm right here. I'm right here, buddy. I'm right here. I mean, he's like, come get some. I mean, he was awesome. He opened the windows instead of closing. And you're right. He opened it up as if just to say, I'm not ashamed of my God. You're not going to make me feel ashamed. I'm not going to be ashamed. I'm not going to act ashamed. Why would I act ashamed now? Because of your law threatening my life? Why should that make me ashamed? Why should that intimidate me? He wanted to make sure they knew. He wasn't being a brazen, arrogant jerk. He was saying opposite. My spirit is not one of fear and timidity. My spirit's the one of courage. My spirit's the one of honoring God no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the consequence, no matter what the peer pressure is. He wants them to know none of your peer pressure, none of your threats, none of your hollow, empty intimidations will affect my worship and my solidarity to my God. How many of us can do that? How many of us can say that? Can stay true to your God in the lieu of intimidation, fear, mongering, threat of death, and be all the more like letting them know, I want you to know I'm not intimidated by you. That's why I open the windows up. To say I'm not intimidated by you. I'm not fearful of what you're claiming is going to happen to me. If I do die, then good. I'm dying because I did things the right way. He's doing what the Hebrew children said earlier, chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. If I live, I live. If I die, I die. It doesn't matter to him. What matters is I'll be found doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not going to let anybody fearmonger to me or intimidate me and make me cower down to not do what's right. I will always do what's right, always speak what's true, no matter what the consequence. That's what he's saying. That is some kahunas, man. That is some bravery. That's pretty awesome. Reminds me of Martin Luther at the Council of Worms when he said, even if demons themselves manifest themselves in front of me, I will not recant what I've said against the Catholic Church. And they were threatening his life. He said that. I'm like, goodness gracious. As flawed as he was as a human, that's a real testosterone moment right there. That was a real, that was like a manly man thing he did there. But women can do that too. We saw Esther do it. The moxie of her to walk in at Xerxes, be like, "Pa! Open the door. What up?" She's like, they could just. She's like, he's like, "Tell me what you want." And I love her moxie. I'll tell you later on the night. Boy, the kahuna's on her to walk in unannounced, and then he goes, "Okay, she's not gonna die. What do we need, Esther? I'll tell you later on the night. I'll make you a feast and talk about it." Dude, you walked unannounced and you made him wait? You got some moxie, girl. That's like the symbolism of Daniel. What he's doing here is real similar to Esther going, yeah, Mordecai just reminded me, this is the time that I was made for, to do this. She was so convinced that God had her in that place at this moment, at this time, it doesn't matter what's going to happen to her. She had to speak up. And so she didn't care. She just knew that her trust and faith was in God. That's where Daniel's at. This whole mindset saying, it doesn't matter what you can do to me. It matters with, am I going to honor and trust God the same way, with or without peer pressure, intimidation, fear, threat of death? Does it change the way I act or worship God? It didn't with Esther. It didn't with Daniel. They were bad to the bone, Jack. They were all the more openly yeah, what are you going to do about it? I mean, it's like there's this brazen, go ahead. Like they knew that their God's over all. I love this. Daniel's like, yeah, come get some. And so here in verse 11, then these men assembled, found Daniel, praying, which is talking to God, make a supplication before his God. Then in verse 12, Daniel 6, then they came near and spoke before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man should ask a petition of any god or man until 30 days, save you, O king, and they should be cast in the den of lions? The king answered and said, this is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which alters not, can't be changed. In verse 13, which means undeniable true, you can't change it. Chapter 6, Daniel, verse 13. Then they answered, said before the king that Daniel, which is one of the children of the captivity of Judah, he regards not, which means he appoints not you. He doesn't appoint you, O king, nor the decree that has been signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Meaning, they're trying to say he doesn't respect you. That's what it means when they say he doesn't regard you. The word there is appoint. He's not setting in his mind that you are the most important person. He's saying that you have no authority over him. That's right. Like Jesus said to Pontius Pilate in John 18. You have no authority over me. That's been given to you by heaven. You don't take my life. I lay it down. So Daniel's saying, he's not no God. Daniel's saying, I ain't no Jesus. I ain't no Messiah. But this I do know. I regard no man over God. And no man takes my life except for God. If he wants to take it through your hand, then so be it. But know this, I'm not going to respect you, regard you. I'm not going to appoint you as over me, as who guards my fear, intimidation. No, I fear God. God intimidates me, not a man. So yeah, so about that. So what? I love Daniel's moxie. I love it. Daniel's bad to the bone. Then he goes on, and he says, he doesn't regard you or the decree. He's saying not you or the Persian Medes and Persian law. He's saying not you, king, and your position, nor our kingdom's law of our people. He's just saying that I don't care what the laws of men or who operates in the office of the law of man. The institution or the person doesn't influence my intimidation or fear at all. It's God himself who guides my actions and my thoughts. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, it says he was sorely displeased with himself. That means he was ashamed. He was ashamed. Interesting enough, it reminds me of those, he was showing what Jesus is bringing out here as the typology of this happening, of what happens in the Messianic reign. There's this passage in the book of Hebrews in chapter 6, verse 6. Having fallen away again, it's impossible to renew them unto reformation. They having re-crucified are exposing to contempt the Son of God. Exposing to contempt the Son of God. Like when you're in contempt of court,
right?
That means you're disregarding, dishonoring the judge in their station. So when he's saying he was ashamed, it's talking about, now in this particular practical reality, it's King Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, who was ashamed of himself that he got played. Practically speaking, in the reality of the history of it, he's talking about himself. But in typology, he's talking about how Jesus is saying, I hold you in contempt. You're trying to pull a fast one on me. I hold you in contempt. You're trying to act as if that you can play me because I'm not a high priest. That I won't. That you're acting as if I'm not acting as a high priest right now. You can actually do things that can impose upon me what I should and shouldn't do. How dare you? How dare you? And it says he's ashamed. I think it speaks to Jesus showing his disgust toward us, who are made sinless, who are the ones where he says in Matthew 13, he removes all the seducers and iniquitous people, the stumbling blocks and those going against the law out of his kingdom as the tares, right? Well, who seduces them? The 60 fruit offshoot people, those two, the princes, the 30 fruit people who don't have the extra measure of oil. They are the ones who are the seducers. They're the ones who were sinless and knew better. And they got caught in this sin. He's like, you think I don't understand that? I'm ashamed of you. That's what I think he's talking about here. In reality, it's Cyrus the Great being played, and he's ashamed of himself that they played him. Jesus is pointing out in symbolism, these people think they can do this and not get punished for it. There's no recourse for what you're doing. He's ashamed. It's a shameful thing for God to have made you sinless, and this is what you've done with it. It's shameful. You should be ashamed of yourself. So then, he says here in verse 14, he was displeased with himself, setting his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And it says he labored till the going down of the sun to rescue him. What does that speak to? He attempted many times to make new decrees, new edicts. And they said, remember, King, you signed it. This is the deal for 30 days. And you can't go against that which is signed. You signed the order itself, and you also signed the edict that says you can't change the order, and you know the rules of the Medes and Persians. What does that speak to you about this symbolic aspect of God the Son? Well, during the 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, 24 to 28, it tells you that he has to hand over the kingdom for God the Father to be all in all. There's a part he has to play. He has to stay tuned into that facet of his will that he is fulfilling the prophecies of his kingship. He has to rule from the throne of Father David. He doesn't have the time to go up to heaven as he does go to and fro. He can't hang out there and make everything right from these idiots who are getting involved in sinful nature things on the earth when they're going to and from. He can't, but he's doing everything he can because he is going to and fro. Praise Jacob's ladder. We're doing that, and so is he. He's ruling and reigning both heaven and earth, but he's ruling from earth. He's not going to be up there in heaven and trying to help. No, you're going to get caught away and you're traversing back and forth and tangled up in this sin. He's like, look, I'm going to do everything I can to help you, but unfortunately, there's a certain stopgap here that I'm not here. That's not my role at this point. My role, I can't go beyond my role at this point. And your role at this point supersedes that. Since I have to continue to work, your job was to continue to work with me. And since you're working against me, you're now bearing that on your own. I can do all I can to help you. I set the stage in place to help you. I made your sin go away. I made you aware of going into the Aristotle, which I had the Dipnon. I gave you a there of what you're fighting for. I gave you a stacked deck in your favor to be sinless, and yet you're the one who I can't. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm not going to go beyond what I already set in motion as the rules of my messianic reign. And the rules are he focuses on being king to his people Israel and to reign over his kingdom. That's his that's his full thing, right? You said Obama did. You're funny. I know what king was signed the edict, he can never be changed, right? And he did it, and that's the Medo-Persian rule, and that's why they got him. He signed both the edict of what the rule was, and he also signed the writing, and he also signed the decree that says I can't go against it. He tried to make other decrees to kind of add flavor, to kind of make it so that he could do it, and they're like, nope, can't do it. So then, and it says he labored, which means he just did many attempts, right? So in verse 15, then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king, Know, O king, the law of the Medes and Persians, that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed or altered. Verse 16, chapter 6. Then the king commanded And they brought Daniel and cast him into the lion's den, the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, God whom thou serves continuously, perpetually, he will deliver you. Meaning, it's a declaration, you have a precious faith promise, no harm will come to you. Which there won't. Verse 17. And one stone was brought and laid before the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and the signet of his lords. So it's sealed. Going back to the precious faith promise. Him and his lords, meaning him and his word. So he, Jesus, gave Daniel, as a faithful one, typology here, a promise to him on the basis of his character and his word. That once you're the betrothed bride, never shall you change that status. You will always be the bride and one day revealed as such. That's my character and that's my word. That's why it says his signet and of his lords. Speaking to the word, the character, and the word. His character is him signet, and the lords represents him being accountable to his word. Then, that the purpose may not be changed concerning Daniel. Verse 18, and the king went to his palace, and he passed the night, it says, fasting, or that means without a feast. Meaning, this attack against faithful ones during the Messianic kingdom will happen during the Ariston prior to the Deipnon. And that's why he's referencing this typology of the king, Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, same guy. He's typifying Jesus, who is going without a marriage feast during the Messianic reign in lieu of and waiting anticipation of procuring his bride when the Deipnon, when he rises up from the household or from his station down here to take his throne up in heaven. Because remember, Jesus has 3 thrones he sits on. Throne of Father David, according to Revelation 3, the Father's throne he sat on, has his own throne. He hasn't sat on that one yet. He will. And that's the one he gets when he gets at that marriage feast, like on heaven. That's why he says here in verse 18, the king went to his palace and passed the night. And again, without a feast, with fasting. Neither were there instruments of music before him, and his sleep was fled from him. Meaning God doesn't rest. There is no rest God has. He's always diligent and vigilant to care for his faithful one, his betrothed bride. There's nothing that will happen to the betrothed bride. Nothing during the Messianic reign. You can try your worst. Those of jealousy and envy, those who are in sin, those who fall into sin. Doesn't matter. Try your worst, what this story is about. Ain't going to happen. What you're not going to do is succeed. What you are going to do is dig your own grave. I wouldn't suggest it. So here, this is 30 days, referencing again that maturity they were lacking. That's why the 30 days, it was a limit. And here, it says here, which probably explains why he probably signed it, thinking it says 30 days. Yeah, but he should have read it, right? Then the king arose, in verse 19, very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. Refers to, early in the morning, Mary Magdalene ran quickly to the tomb of Jesus, meaning anticipation of the new beginning of the restoration of that which people think is the revealing, the restoration and revealing of Christ as being the resurrected Lord was meant by a very early in the morning Mary Magdalene getting there first, right? So here's this king raised up very early in the morning, reminding people that, hey, what happens to the betrothed bride who's being attacked, who, like Revelation 3, Philadelphia called out one people were being told, hold fast to your crown, that no one can take it. Why? This is what's happening, because there's 5 rich people trying to take your crown. They want to take you away from that betrothed bride. They want to take you away, which they can't do. Doesn't mean they're not going to try. They can't win, but they're going to not stop trying. They're still sinful, or they got into sin, and they're being puppeteered by the influence of Satan, by the Paneros level of him. So here it says, and they early in the morning he went and hastened to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamenting voice. A lamenting voice. Sounds a lot like the end of day 7. When we know, Matthew 25, there's what? At the midnight cry. That's insane. That's crazy. And why is den of lions in view with this faithful one? Because there's those who are going to be sons of disobedience earmarked by going to this den of lions, this lake of fire. The lions represent those who are overcome by sin. That's their final realized judgment because of that. He had a lamenting voice unto Daniel, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver you from, this means out of, the lions. As in out of sin. Lions represent that which is sinful in you that overcomes. Remember, Jesus is the Lion of Judah who took on our sins. Satan is described as a roaring lion who devours us because we give in to our sins. Either way, sin is associated with the lion. Do you see that? The Lion of Judah who takes our sin on, or Satan who poses as a lion who devours us because we give in to our sin. So here when he says, who has delivered you from the lions out of your sin? In other words, did you give in to sin? He's like, nope, no sin overtook me, Jack. Because he was a sinless body in day 7 Messianic reign, he sustains a sinless body, and there's nothing you could do. As 1 Thessalonians 5:23, Paul wants us to be blameless in spirit, soul, and body. Daniel in verse 21, he uttered to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent what? His angel. Not just an angel, his angel, the personal angel of God. Showing again a special privilege and a precious faith promise. And he has shut the mouths of the lions, meaning he did not allow sin to overcome me. I didn't overcome sin. He allowed sin not to overcome me, being sinless as a typology of those in day 7, millennial reign. But of course, Daniel in real life was sinful. He just means that, again, they didn't overcome him. But typology talked about this sinless state of us in millennial reign. They have not hurt me. They didn't hurt me. For as much as before of them, innocence was found in me. That word is zaku. The word zaku for innocence means purity. Parallels with the aspilos, anakaliktos, noticed of the bride. That's who Daniel's a type of here. Why all these different symmetries that I'm bringing out? I'm just pointing them out. I didn't make them up. I didn't have a lamenting cry. I didn't have 2 names for a king, Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede, which speaks to Jesus being the Messianic reign, the king for the Jews, but he's also still God of all things, right? There's a day of the Lord and a day of God. He has to fulfill this to all things be fulfilled so God can be all in all. There's 2 dualities of Jesus' role. He's fulfilling his Messianic kingship in view of God being all of all. This is why Cyrus has 2 names, Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede, the royal one of the Medes. Because his mother was Mede and his father was Persian. Again, this idea that he gets to hear and he says, I'm innocent, I was pure, it was found in me. Really? Purity in you? It can't mean he's sinless, because Daniel in real life is sinful. He even says so in chapter 9. We sinned, we sinned, we sinned. But what's he mean by this? In typology, it speaks to the zaku in Hebrew, speaks to the aspilos anakaliktos of the bride. Was found in me. And before you, O king, I have done no wickedness. I love it. And the word wickedness here is the word no hurt. It's the word kabelel. In other words, I have done nothing to harm you, nothing to dishonor you. Daniel did nothing as a type of the betrothed bride in the Messianic reign who entered, did not inherit, because nobody in the heavens inherits till day 8. But he did nothing to dishonor in his entered state as the betrothed bride, because he can't. He's a precious faith promise. He's pure. He's innocent. He's aspilos, anakaliktos. Of course he's not. But doesn't mean they're not going to die trying. They're going to try to get him to. He said, I didn't do anything to dishonor you, Jesus, basically. No, of course he didn't. Verse 23, then was the king exceedingly glad for him. Exceedingly glad. Does that sound familiar to you? At the time when Jesus says, enter into the joy of the Lord. The king was exceedingly glad. Exceedingly glad. And commanded and said, they should take Daniel up, 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 ascending out, up, not from, not out of, up, meaning it was down in a pit, the den of lions, not in some cave or no, it was down, speaking to lake of fire, Hades, Gehenna, lake of fire, and a deep part of that, the abyss, the pit. And it says they brought him up out of the den. So and Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of harm was found upon him, similar to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nothing harm came to him. What kind of harm? No lion attack, no scratch, no bite, but also no broken bones. Why do you say that for? Because keep reading, you'll find out. Because he was thrown into a pit, his bones should have broken. You don't throw someone into a pit. That's what the word dungeon means, a cistern or a pit. You don't throw you in there and now your bones get broken. It's going to happen, Jack. He's like, got nothing. Bones are good, I'm good to go. The lion is a symbol, yeah, so again, a lion is a symbol of a ruler, symbol of a king. That's why Jesus is the Lion of Judah, the ruler of all mankind, of all things. He's creator. But he's also, as that ruler, he took on our sin. And Satan is the ruler of this world, not the God, a ruler of this world, right? And he comes after us, trying to devour us within our sin. Which is why lion's associated with being a ruler, but also it's associated with sin. Either getting us to be, because think about it, what Jesus said, a godly king will lead you into righteous living. An ungodly king will do what? Lead you into unrighteous living. So the ruler impacts how sin affects you. Right? That's why sin and that ruler are connected. The lion does represent a ruler or a king. But he's talking about that ruler dictates how sin is then impacted and how it connects to that ruler. If you have Jesus as your ruler, he takes away your sin. If you have Satan as your ruler, he's going to devour you in your sin. And that's why the lion represents, how does sin rule over you? Are you overcoming it because of the blood of the Lamb? Or is it overcoming you because you're being led by Satan? Influenced by Satan? Yee. That ain't cool. Don't let sin rule over you, it says, right? So there you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jesus is not reigning and ruling right now. Satan is the ruler, and he's I'd say, false king, which is why he comes about the Stephanos, right? On the white horse, right? Yeah, he's a ruler, a prince. I wouldn't say king, I'd say prince. Because he wants to, I don't want to give him the word, you could say king, but I don't like to look at him that way, because I say he's always one step below any accolade he could have. Ruler and prince. I wouldn't say king. Stephanos could lead to saying a king, but even then it's more like a steward, ruler, prince is more appropriate. I don't like saying king, so I don't like the Yahoo. So, and then when we go to verse 23, so no manner of hurt was found upon him because he believed in his God. Verse 24, then the king commanded and said that they brought those mighty men. That's what it means, mighty men. These mighty men means men that were strong. In other words, these men weren't some slouches. These weren't people that didn't know better, basically. They knew better. Which had accused, which means they nitpicked and they chewed out Daniel. They were constantly looking for ways to devour him with some narrative of nitpicky disposition, validation of a narrative type argument. He's like, oh, all y'all come here right now. And he cast them into the den of lions, their children and their wives, which speaks to, just like in Matthew 18, the story of the righteous king, when he said, you owe me so much money, I could have you and your wife and your children enslaved for life. Because you owe me lifetimes, you owe me 3 lifetimes of a debt, which means you can't pay it off in your lifetime, because it's over 3 lifetimes you have to pay it. So I got your wife and kid also, your kids also as recourse. These speak to the fruit yield or the results that you owe God. Either you owe him the results or he takes from you your fruit. You give him the fruit he requires or he takes what you already have. I think I read that somewhere. For me who has, take from him and give it to those who hasn't, all right? He who has not, take it from him, right? He took from them the children and their wives as a taking of their fruit yield. They get disinherited. And the mastery of them and broke and pulverized their bones in pieces before or ever they came into the bottom of the den, meaning they were already disinherited before the lions overcame them. That's what verse 24 just said. The king said, your ultimate judgment is the lions are going to eat you alive. But before that happens, I'm going to disinherit you. I'm going to take away your fruit yield, your children, and your wives, and I'm going to take away your positional status by breaking your bones. That's what, without our bones, we're just a pile of ooze. Without bones, what are we? We're just ooze. I mean, think about that. Bones make us into a structure of a human being. Without bones, we're just a pile of ooze, like a glob. How you doing? I mean, come on. So bones give us structure or a position, a stature. He took away their fruit yield, children and wives, and their positional stature. Their status of the kingdom of the God or the kingdom of the heavens was taken from them. They were disinherited from their place, and from their fruit yield was taken, and then they were thrown into the lion's den. Before sin's judgment ever encompassed them, the lake of fire, the lion's den, they were already disinherited, and they knew it. Wives and children with them, and their bones were broken. And then the lions came and devoured them. They're like, well, that sucks. Yeah, you think? That's why I wouldn't go against God and His Word. Stop being jealous and envious and all this stupid stuff, right? Yeah, I know, right? What about to each his own sin? Remember, to your point, Sister Vicky, the difference is they knew, like when God said the sins of the father are on his children's children, right? Generations after him, right? They knew this. In Ephesians, New Testament, because that's Old Testament, New Testament, Jesus says, honor your mother and father so your days may be long. Maybe. Doesn't mean they will be. But if you want a shot at it, you better obey your parents. You better honor them. Right? So, similitude to this is, they knew the law of the land. But if you go against the king in a way that, again, dishonors him, disrespects him, disobeys him, it's not just you. It's you and your entire family. And they knew that. That's at risk of life. The Romans were the first people that did that. The Romans were known for that. You go against the eagle of Rome, your whole family gone. They weren't the first ones who did that. The Romans did that. The Greeks did that. The Medes and Persians did that. The Babylonians did that. That's why, remember, under Nebuchadnezzar, he said, kill the wise men and burn their houses. Remember? So if you come against a king, it's not just you. They knew you're putting your wife and children at risk. All because your animus, your hatred, your jealousy, your resentment for one man. Is it really worth it? Which speaks to today. The reason why God put these practical things in place back in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, you see people doing this. Remember, when the one man believed that you should be saved, you and your household. Opposite's true too. You live righteous, you can have your household be impacted by your righteous living unto salvation. When the unsanctified, when they're both unbelievers and the wife is living righteously, she sanctifies her husband, it says, right? So there are scriptures that speak to both sides of this ledger. Unrighteous living can take others around you and unrighteous consequences. Righteous living can lead others to righteous consequences and relieve them and reprieve them from negative realities, right? Both are true. But the reality is that God's pointing out to us that, look at people today. People today want to live as they want to live. I'm dealing with it right now. I'm sure you are too in different ways. We have people in our lives that do what they want, when they want, how they want, but act like they should have no recourse on how they believe their relationship should be with all they know and love. You can't do that. You can't act how you want, when you want, whenever you want, and act like people owe you the relationship that you demand from them. It doesn't work that way. You just can't love them the way you choose to, even though you violate them and you victimize them and you exploit them and you disrespect them and you trash them and you just, abuse them. Then you can just go, and act all nice. It doesn't work that way. You know I know that? Because you can't love God the way you think, can you? No. God says, love me the way I said. He said, love him the way that he said. John 14:21. Jesus said, he who has my commandments, so I have to have them, and keeps them, obeys me, is he that loves me. So wait a second, Jesus. You're telling me that the way to love you the way you say isn't from my heart, isn't from my thoughts, it's from me taking time to pray and get to know you through your word. And then from that, I got to now do it. And from those two things together, then I show I love you. He goes, that's right, son. Are you deaf? No, I got it. I got it. Thank you. My goodness gracious. I didn't know it was a process. I thought it was just a feeling. He's like, that's wrong. Not a feeling. It's a willful action. It's a volitional choice of a consistency of your heart and mind and spirit to say, I want to get to know God, and then from what I know about him, I want to do what I know. I don't care how much you know. Are you willing to learn more and more about him? And the more and more you learn about him, are you keeping true to obey what you know is true about him and what he told you to do? If you don't, then you don't love him. Don't say you do because you don't. Well, I feel in my heart a song comes on and I want to sing it. Doesn't mean nothing. Sorry, it means zero if you're not spending time getting to know him and doing what he says. All those emotional songs you might sing mean nothing to him. Nothing. Zero. You go, you're mean. No, I'm not. Read 1 Peter chapter 3. It's when it says that the man who has a problem with his wife goes to talk to God, and God's like, deaf ear, buddy. See here? Not listening to you. Fix it with your wife first. Say what? Don't believe me. Read 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. You tell me what's up. Got touch straight. God ain't playing with you. Well, I'm mean. She's being a witch and she's mean. I don't care. Make it right. Shut your pie hole and go to your wife and make it right. Well, she was wrong and I was right. I don't care. Make it right. If you want to talk to God, make it right. That's what he tells you. Straightforward. Well, she's wrong and I'm right and I don't care. Well, then you're a dummy. You're being a real dummy. God's not going to listen to you. Ever! If you're at odds with your wife and thinking that's okay, you can still talk to him. He's like, unless you're talking to me about that, that ain't going to happen. What you're not going to do, just obey what I told you to do and act like we're good. No, we're not good. Right? And that's why the children and wives followed them into the den. Because they knew they were coming against the king. That meant their whole family was at risk. They made that choice. The moment they got resentful, the moment they were looking for a narrative to validate, they knew. They knew. Right? Like folks today go, you can't separate children from their families. Okay, like the guy said, when a man is in the car and he has his 2 kids in the back seat and he is drunk out of his mind and he has hit a tree, do you take him to jail and his kids to jail too? No, take him to jail and his kids go to Child Protective Services or back to their mother or other family members, right? Did you just separate children from their family? Of course you did. Because that's the consequence that the dad did. He knew doggone well, getting in that car behind that wheel, drunk off his butt, that he was putting his kids at risk. And if he did do that, then he has every right to be separated from his children. They are now hurting and pained because now they experienced the situation and now their dad's now apart from them. Whose fault is that? Well, the kids shouldn't be collateral damage. I agree. It's not their fault. It's the consequence of their father. Just like right now. The children and wives are the consequence of their husband and father being so self-absorbed in their sinful, rebellious, resentful, hateful animus toward Daniel. For no other reason except for, I want the control. I want the shine from Cyrus. Then go get it yourself. By living the way you're supposed to live. Ask him about his God. Get to know his God, for crying out loud. Goodness gracious. That's so hard for you? Well, they're too prideful for that, you know? Anyway. The idea about killing the family of the offender removed from Jesus came. Yeah, so no, they still did that. When Jesus came about, remember, and the story in the book of Acts, after Jesus rose from the dead, and you're talking about the Apostle Paul, Jesus rose from the dead, AD 34, here's Paul, a good 10 plus years later, he's about 15 years later, he's in the prison, and his nephew comes and tells him that the Jews are going to jump the Roman guard, which they knew put them in. You can read Josephus' writing, which is post-Jesus. Josephus was post-Jesus. He knew that was, they're putting their own lives at risk and their families. The Roman rule didn't change because Jesus died and rose from the dead. They didn't care about him. Not going to change their Roman rules just because he died and rose from the dead. They don't care. They could care less. They still got their rules. The rules are, go against the eagle of Rome, you and your wife and children die. What else you got? Did you know also in Roman culture that if you didn't pay your bills, they dug up your loved ones? They dug up the bones of your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your mom and dad. They dug them up and put them in front of your house, the bones, to disgrace them because they wanted to show everybody in town that you were disgraced, you didn't pay your bills. There was no bankruptcy back then. That's the price you had to pay. That's your bankruptcy court back in the day. They had the bones of your loved ones right before your door, just to shame you. That didn't change post-Jesus resurrection. That was the same. Romans didn't care. They were all about shaming you and about bringing consequences upon you for not subjecting yourself to the eagle of Rome, that under no circumstances could you go against that. There was hell to pay. Didn't matter. Then you're right. How could you redeem yourself? You can't if you're, that's why it's important. That's why it's always important. Like today, you see stories about women who are under a battered man, under a bad man. That's why it always sucks when you see a man of a house living like off the aloof. He puts that women and children in harm's way. It's difficult. It happens in real life, doesn't it? Right? It does. Right? He goes off and does some drug deals. He goes off and does some philanderous things. He goes off. Who's he hurting? Himself? Alone? No. He's hurting her too, isn't he? And the kids too, isn't he? Yep. And the house is taken over by the FBI because he's doing cocaine or because he's doing whatever, drug deals, or he's doing all kinds of illegal financial transactions. Does the wife get subjected to pain too? Yes. That's why the IRS has innocent spouse laws that say, hey, if your husband was defrauding us and you were not a part of it, then you can claim innocent spouse. If that law didn't exist, why does it exist? Because they know that sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not true. But either way, they know that there's a recourse happens to the wife because of what the husband does. I'm just telling you, our laws even today, we recognize that there's collateral damage for what the man does. So, going back to our scripture, as we end this study out, verse 25, 27. Then King Darius wrote on all the people. He wrote and inscribed all people and nations and languages that dwell on the earth. Peace be multiplied unto you. This is referring to this avenue of the culmination of the end of day 7 into day 8, which is why he says peace multiplied to you also in 2 Peter regarding how it's the peace multiplies from entering into inheriting Ariston to Dikenon. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be unto the end. He delivered and rescued, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered, or he advanced, he excelled. He was blessed in the reign of Darius, which is later, in 522 later on, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That's why he says Cyrus the Persian. That's why he says Darius. He wants you to know that under the Medo-Persian Empire, it began with a tumultuous beginning, but once this was come and gone, he wants you to know that he lived and prosperous during Cyrus all the way through Darius when he died. What typology for the betrothed bride, the faithful ones, even though they come after them in the Messianic reign, trying to take their crown from them, as Revelation 3:10 says about the church of Philadelphia. In a similar fashion, this is why he's saying that he wants you to know that this betrothed bride will prosper, not just during the day of the Lord, the Messianic reign, under the typology of Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, but also under Darius, the royal one himself, God the Father, under the day of God, when the bride then, of course, assumes the Dikenon revealed bride, that station where she will always have a ongoing shine before the bridegroom Jesus. That's what he's talking about. So with that being said, that's how chapter 6 ends. And then chapter 7 and 8, as we look ahead a little bit, they're going to have flashbacks under Belshazzar. Then he goes into King Ahasuerus in chapter 9 and 10. He goes flashbacks under what he just talked about with Cyrus. So the next couple of chapters are flashback chapters. 7 and 8 are flashbacks under Belshazzar. 9 and 10 are flashbacks under 9, 10, 11 are flashbacks under the King Ahasuerus, King Cyrus, and then you have all the way to the end of the book. So he doesn't really go past this, as you will see. So the next couple of chapters, 7 and 8, are a flashback to Belshazzar. Then after that, he's going back to what happened under Cyrus. Cyrus the Great, known as Darius the Mede, who's the son of Ahasuerus, meaning a son of a prince, son of a chief one. Okay? So with that being said, we're going to just continue on our next week, and I want to preemptively tell you ahead of time, I have knee surgery coming up on January 14th. And because of that, we will not be able to have service that following Sunday, because I cannot stand. I'm not supposed to stand. I'm supposed to lay up for a week. He said probably 2 to be safe. So we're going to have one Sunday we're going to miss upcoming. So next week we will meet on Sunday. We'll meet again Sunday, this coming Sunday. We'll meet again next week. on January the 12th, we'll meet, and we'll have service on the 12th on chapter 7 of Daniel. But I just want to make sure you ahead of time know that we'll be having that 1 week off, so I have to have some time to heal from my knee to be able to stand again. Okay? So, with that being said, just close in prayer, and also remind you that coming up is our time away in Gatlinburg, which will be from March 7th, a Friday, through the following Friday. So it'll be the March, the second week in March. We won't be able to have a service in the future, but I'll tell you about that more when we get closer. But to now, we'll see you next Sunday, and then the following, I'll remind you of the surgery we won't be able to have. So, all right, let's close and pray. So, Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have and all you give to us to help us to see, learn, and have insight into your word. Help us to learn more about your servant, as you call him, your prophet Daniel. Help us to be like him, 66 years of faithfulness and just duty to you in such a way where the courage and the tenacity and just the fervor for him to stand boldly, not in any fear or intimidation. He didn't waver. He all the more stood strong, being blameless and spotless, being zuka, being pure and innocent in your eyes, as you say. And help us to be likewise strong in our faith, that anybody who wants to look for a narrative in us can't find corruption, can't find some reasoning to want to accuse us. Let us examine ourselves as you remind us, and help us to be always faithful to you and remove the sin from our lives. Help us to be honorable to you, and knowing that there's a lot at stake, and holding true to what we know is more valuable than anything in this life. Help us not to be just seeking after goals of achievements in life, but the primary goal of achieving greater closeness with you, greater understanding with you, a greater spiritual walk with you, so that we're not the same year after year. We're different, that you change us, that you fracture us, you break us, you remold us, and fashion us into your image. Help us be the case for us in 2025 and years to come and the days to come until you call us home. We ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.